republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we call to order and establish quorum?
President, Don Wells.
Here.
Vice President, Marilyn Stout.
Here.
Second Vice President, Al Roper.
Here.
Secretary, Molly Knotts. I'm here. Treasurer, Bill Tubb. Let's see. Director, Ron Spooner.
Here.
Director, who else am I missing?
Scott D.
Oh, Scott
Philippus.
D. Philippus. I'm looking right at you.
Here.
We're all here.
Okay, quorum's established, and we have notice of proof of notice.
Yeah, and actually this meeting required 14 days notice by mail, which we have an affidavit signed by our secretary that we performed that 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so the meeting's called to order. All the preliminaries are done, and the next item on the agenda are resident comments. Do we have a list?
Jim Swigert?
Be on the line. Is capital improvements on here? The reserve study, is it in that?
The reserve study is on the agenda.
Tell me where.
Item 16.
Okay, then my question is on the reserve study, has the finance committee, as a committee, gave you input?
They received the reserve study, and yes, they gave me input.
Okay, thanks.
Next is, I'm sorry. Next is Eric Blythe.
Can you speak in the microphone, please?
Yes, it's on.
I actually had two questions relating to the agenda. One is agenda item number 8.3, Taylor Morrison litigation. Can you describe the fee structure that we're paying? Are we paying any fees, or is it all contingency?
I can answer that. Our new agreement with Morgan & Morgan, and specifically with Paul Sangiovanni, is what you would call as a shared risk agreement, which is a contingency fee agreement. So going forward, we do have a contingency fee agreement now. No attorney's fees. There are litigation-related fees, such as experts, court costs, and those, but it's a shared risk. They don't get paid unless we get paid.
Okay. And the other was, I couldn't find on here where it would show what the HOA dues collection balance is. Can you direct me to that, please?
It would be in the financials, which are not in your board pack. What you can do is shoot me an email, and if you're interested in specifically, what about the collection rate?
I want to know what the balance is.
Yep. So if you send me an email tomorrow, I'll be able to share. It's in the full set of financials. The board gets that, but an abbreviated version is on your chair and is on the website. So that much more detail we have available to anybody that's interested. So if you email me. Yeah, I'd say we've got about, and we're going to talk about it in one of the agenda items tonight, but I would say we're probably looking at about 300,000 or so. Yeah. And next is Thomas Robertson.
Hello, everyone. Before I go to doom and gloom, I want to at least compliment everybody today that as we got 6 months into the year, we are bottom line showing a surplus against what we had. But as Mr. Tubbs goes into his report, I would love for him to touch on a few things that are probably already there. One would be the line pool supplies. At the rate we're going, it's going to probably come to about 50,000. It's budgeted by 15,000. I'm sure there's a reason that it's at that particular point. I'm just wanting to know. Same thing would be for the grounds trees. The trees number seems to be a little bit also out of whack, and those are the ones that glare out to me. As I say, also, we are financially sound from what the thing says so far this year. And I just like to have an extra comment on the resales. It looks like, if I'm reading right, and you can do that in your report also, that we will probably be putting over $400,000 into our reserves. I just wanted to make sure that was also touched upon if we stay at the same rate that we are now. And CenturyLink account summary. Is it available yet?
So I can answer a few. I'm going to let Bill answer the CenturyLink account in a minute.
Just CenturyLink.
I'm sorry?
The CenturyLink
I understand.
account. Have
So
we
I'm
have
gonna
got
let
that
Bill-
yet?
I'm going to let Bill answer that question, and I'll answer the first three. So on the, in the budget, the pool supplies, what happened was, after the budget was created for 2019, a decision was made by the board to remove an employee from pool attendance and hire a contractor to oversee the pools. And so that is why that line item is over budget. The tree line item is over budget, and I just think it was probably a bad budget number. But I would say on aggregate, and part of my report tonight is I do a reforecast every month, and that reforecast is plugging in all the actuals up until we have the financials, and we're at 6 months now, and then I can better see the trends and stay on top of expenses a little bit better by doing that every month. And then I go ahead and forecast out to predict where we'll be at the end of the year. And right now, it's actually turned a little bit more favorable than when I was at the Finance Committee meeting. And I feel comfortable right now. We're at a zero budget for the end of the year. So I see no alarms, because while there are some line items that are over budget, we have line items that are under budget. And for instance, the employee line item, because that employee is no longer there, that's under budget, I think like $25,000. It could be, but there's probably 20 line items that are over budget and 20 that are under budget. And again, we're very close. $4.5 million budget, as long as, if we're within 1%, we're looking really good. And we're not spending too much. We're not assessing you guys too much, but we're not assessing you too little. But I think next year we're probably going to need to look at some standards within our budget. And I did a quick calculation, and I'm sorry, that $300,000 isn't on the collection that the gentleman asked. We're probably closer to 125, 150, something like that.
119 is what's on the...
119, okay. So, thank you. Next speaker, Bill on the seal.
I don't know what you're talking about with CenturyLink. We don't have any fund like that. We have a telecommunications surplus fund. Is that what you're asking about? As I told you last month, I'd be happy to give you the detail of that for yourself. The Finance Committee report for the month of July's meeting is on the website. You can look at that and see what they've done. That's in their agenda to be done. It's a project they're going to do. It's working its way up.
I'm just going to ask each one, because we're going on 4 months now.
Next speaker, Chris Bechtel.
Hello, everyone. Mr. President. And anyway, I just wanted to say I was looking over the agenda. When I was looking over the agenda, a seemingly minor request caught my attention, and that is the request for appropriation for funds to replace umbrellas at the pool. And I inquired about it to Jerry and Libby, and they gave me what seemed to be a reasonable reply, that they would simply be replacing the most needed ones like with like. In other words, making sure to match the umbrella color to the chairs beneath it. And I thought, and also I was told that if the board was thinking about appropriating a lot of money, like $60,000 or more, then they would actually think about changing colors or design plans. And anyway, I started thinking, I don't think that that's actually likely to happen, that there's going to be a demand for people to change the color of the furniture at the pool. And so actually, I just want to remind everyone that the pool has functional value, but it also has aesthetic value. And if the appearance of everything is more beautiful, then that actually increases everyone's property values. So, and when the pool was changed from the multicolored tile that it had been originally to all blue, there was no change made in what the umbrellas or the furniture were going to be. In fact, that had been kind of like just sort of put in piecemeal over the years anyway. And so what I would like to suggest now, in thinking that something that my mother always said, that nothing endures like the temporary, and if we just replace a few umbrellas with, okay, we'll leave them orange because that meant it's just for temporary, that might just endure for a good long time, because there would be no reason to replace durable umbrellas. So I have a suggestion, and I think that we could approach it in an economical way, and that is if you could appoint a ad hoc committee with the purpose of coming up with a color palette for future colors for the umbrellas and the furniture. Then, you know, this committee could be small, and I believe also we have people in the community who are professional designers and would have good suggestions. So I think that then the umbrellas could be and chairs could be phased in over time more economically. So that's my suggestion. I'd like you to consider that whenever you're discussing this line item. Thanks.
Thank you, we will.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Any other resident comments?
No further.
Okay, we want to, has everyone read the past meeting minutes? Are there any changes or corrections, additions or subtractions? Okay, then I make a move that we approve the minutes as posted.
I so move.
Okay. Move the minutes approved. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the president's report. Sandoval, we're moving ahead at lightning speed. Not only has lightning been striking our community from outside, but your board has been creating its own lightning bolts in the name of progress for the community. Tonight, you had the opportunity to meet our attorney, who will be assisting us in the final step to total autonomy. With the talent and expertise and experience of qualified individuals in key positions, we as a community will set ourselves on a course to true independence. Given a chance, you will be afforded an opportunity to belong to a community that is truly the best. I personally cannot be more pleased with the ability of our current board members and how they are emotionally attached to a positive outcome for Sandoval. I do find them at times discouraged by constant attacks being levied toward them on social media. I just ask everyone to step back. Give them a chance to prove what great outcomes they are attempting to make for all of you. And a bit of advice. If you want to say something negative, lay down until the urge goes away. On the current event front, I can tell you that with intense negotiations with LCEC and Bose Electric, the electric meter mounts that were so unsightly are going away. The new standard for height will be 4'6", not 5'6". And the new mounts have already been placed in the landscape beds. Tomorrow, the meter equipment will be transferred to the new post and the other posts taken away. With our landscape committee fully on board, they have surveyed the site and will provide the needed alterations to conceal the meter posts at each site. I want to thank Jim Swigert and my fellow board members for their Herculean efforts in making this change happen. It was truly a team effort. Regarding home sales in the reserve account, we find ourselves on pace to far exceed any of our most positive expectations for contributing to the reserve account this calendar year. Home sales at the end of June were a staggering 71. At this sales pace, we are on course to contribute over $400,000 into our reserve account. This will mean that current homeowners will not be required to contribute to this account in the upcoming 2020 budget. An area of concern for me is the deed restriction enforcement of the trash can policy. I feel that if we cite a homeowner for a violation, we should have a ready answer into how to correct the deficiency. And I will ask our ARC committee to come up with a list of positive solutions within the next 30 days. At our next board meeting, this announcement will be made so that we can vet it and hopefully your board give it its blessing. Another area of concern for me is the placement of yard waste on the street several days before the scheduled trash pickup. It's unsightly and it's offensive to your neighbors. I would ask each of you to refrain from this practice and to additionally tell your landscapers to take away the clippings or the trimmings that they bag and place at the end of the street from Saturday through Wednesday and not leave them out there for us to look at the entire week. All residents need to go to a place for immediate information for our community. And we are working toward this end with the addition of our new community Sandoval Cape Coral Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram. We want you to be able to find the most current and accurate information about Sandoval at these sites. It's new, but it will become the go-to site for the future. I encourage you all to please sign up and join today. An example of this is last night on that site was posted that these electric meters were going to go away and we were getting something a lot more positive. This is current. This is what we want to know. There are litigation issues that are going on, and we would like you to know all the details. But as Attorney Sangiovanni stated, this is not the nature of this type of process. Please bear with us and know that we will have your back for the best possible outcome for Sandoval, even though we can't talk about it and give you all the details. And in closing, I have the utmost respect for each member of the board, and I know that the job is not an easy one as it carries with it many frustrations. As a community, I ask each of you to call us, email us, or contact us to express your concerns. Social media posts without first letting us know your issues solve nothing. We welcome a conversation or an email in an attempt to make your life better. Thanks for hearing me out.
I have a copy of it. Thank you.
And the next item is the treasurer's report.
Was that 3 minutes?
I didn't time that one.
It wasn't, but I will be. The June 30 financial highlights, per Jeff Moore, the Pope Director of Accounting. There was one item that was of interest. The June invoice for Enviro was not received by Sandoval in time to post it to the financial statements. Jeff accrued it so that the financial statements are correct, but he did not accrue it to the telecommunications surplus account, so it shows that there was a higher contribution than what's appropriate. That will be corrected in July when the June and July invoices are posted, so it'll be correct. But this month, particular month, it shows a higher contribution than what would normally be. Since our meeting in May, when I pointed out several budget line items were either near or above their budgeted items, the general managers worked hard to recast our budget and keep on top of it. Currently, as of June 30, we are at 55.8% of our budgeted revenues and 55.4% of our budgeted expenditures. No changes to our investments since our June meeting. The next renewal will be the Community State Bank CD on August the 23rd, 2019, and we'll have to replace it at that time. The investment options that I received today show they're back up in the 1.9 to 2.1% level, so we're probably going to get less for it than the one that's maturing, but that's the market. The board resolved to authorize Jerry Evans, Jeff Moore, and myself to be the authorized contacts with BB&T Bank in regard to the Cube account, and we're still working on that. General Manager Evans has confirmed to the Finance Committee that the new accounts payable processing procedure recommended by the committee has been instituted and is working even better than anticipated. He thanked the Finance Committee for their assistance. The current balances in the reserve fund and in the telecommunications surplus fund are $2,285,576.08 and $1,785,776.52 respectively. That's all.
You beat me. Thank you.
First thing I have on my report related to deed enforcement. I do talk about deed enforcement a little bit further in the agenda, but I just want to let everybody know that this past Tuesday, we hit trees and landscaping a little bit harder. So we sent out right under 200 letters for trees that were hanging low over streets, over sidewalks, and that were bunched together or hitting the house and those type of things. So expect those. If you haven't already received them, you might get one of those in the mail. The other thing I wanted to explain, I think Don hit on a little bit prior, was the trash can rule. And basically, the rule says that you are required to store your trash can in the garage or on the side of the house and screened from street view with either a fence, wall, or landscaping. So, to what Don alluded to, we understand because of the size of garages that may be impractical to do at all times. So there's just so many violations out there. I'm glad Don has tasked the ARC to do that. So within, like Don said, within 30 days, we will send out notification, probably email blast with that information. Until that point, if there's an effort given in screening the trash can, you should not receive a violation. And further, we're not sending second violations for those right now either, meaning we're only sending friendly reminders until we have come up with a solution within the next 30 days. And then, like I said, general deed restriction process, gates, rights, collections will be included in the agenda a little bit further. I did want to take an opportunity to explain an issue we had with one of the gates that struck a boat. And actually, the boat had, I think it was probably about a 25-foot boat, pretty big boat, had 2 fishing poles on the back of it, was going to the Pine Island resident guest entry, sorry. And he did everything properly, and as soon as the barrier arm went up, the gate opened, and he proceeded through in a timely fashion. But about 2/3, maybe 3/4 in the back of his boat were his fishing poles, and you could see the bar come down, tagged the top of the poles, and immediately went back up. You could see the fishing poles kind of go back and forth, so it was obvious that it hit him. So through some investigation with Bose Electric on the loops and why the loop didn't prevent that from happening, the message I want to give to you guys is, and I'm not certain this is the fact, but what I learned through this is an aluminum trailer will not pick up the mass. And so for those of you who don't know, a loop detector, it detects a metal mass. So if the boat has an aluminum trailer, there's not a lot of them out there, but there's enough that they've seen it before. The loop will not detect it. So you should, if you have an aluminum trailer, you should contact me, and we need to come up with a resolution for you to get that boat in and out. So there will be more on that via an email blast going out. And again, I don't know if this particular boat had an aluminum trailer, but again, through that discussion, that's what was found. Talked about a little bit earlier, the reforecast. We anticipate still to be at a zero balanced operating budget by the end of the year. Some really good news on towing. So it was bad until 4 days ago, but I have to give kudos to Somerville was able to identify a towing company that had adequate insurance, and I think we've used them here before, Wanted Dead or Alive. Sorry about the name of them. But I've talked with them extensively, and they seem like a very professional company, and their insurance levels are such of a professional company. I have sent them a contract to execute. They're having their attorneys look at it now, and she has verbally told me she sees no issues, but she just needs to run it by them. Then there's a process. They'll put their signage up in the community, then the city has to come out and inspect, and then we can begin towing. So it won't happen within a couple or a few days, but it looks very good now that within a week or two is the timeline I'm thinking we will be able to tow. So prior to that, and I'll probably be preparing something either Friday, Monday, or Tuesday, is an email going out to everybody in the community, kind of forewarning and letting you guys know the things that we'll be towing for, but there's going to be no changes, but it's just, I guess, a refreshed message that we're going to give. Then the last thing I want to talk about is an HOA orientation. I think everybody here has probably been through one, and it's the process is a little clunky and it's not very efficient for the office. So what we've asked the communications committee to do is to video the HOA orientation. And the reason I'm mentioning it is just another thing one of our committees are doing to make our operations more efficient. And if you knew the time it took Carol to give those, you would applaud this, because she's so taxed already. This gives her a little bit more time to do the things that we're asking her to do. And I'm sorry, lastly, I just really wanted to thank volunteers again. We had a situation with the air conditioning last night, and we had a volunteer homeowner help us out last night and help us out today. He has an AC or electrical background, very helpful. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had a mailer, and Carol called. We had 12 people come at the spur of the moment and helped us stuff envelopes. And then, of course, everybody on the board, I can't even put a dollar amount to the professional services that we're getting for free as an association from the board. And then our committees, and like I said, homeowners even. So this is easily, after doing this for almost 15 years now, this is easily the highest volunteer community I've ever seen. And I just think it's absolutely wonderful. I'm glad I landed here. So thank you guys very much. That's it.
Thank you, Jerry. We'll go into our ad hoc committee reports, and the first one is the sunshade.
Thank you. Our monthly meeting was held at Stony Hill Court at 6:30 p.m. Board member Spooner was in attendance as a visitor. Items discussed were the additional questions asked of the two bidders and soliciting an additional bid as requested by some board members. Board members Wells and Roper had 14 questions of their own, which were addressed to the best of our knowledge, and some were of technical matter that were asked of the vendors. As we stand here today, or sit, 3 months into our charged task, here is our final conclusion. Corecat, Apollo SunGuard, and Playmore were all solicited to bid on the Sunshade project. Only Corecat has responded to all of our requests with clear and definitive language. Apollo SunGuard has yet to provide us with a revised proposal. They have said via email that they will be in contact with the chair, myself, but have yet to do so, and we are already 5 days since that email. They are verbally giving us an additional 5% discount from their initial bid of $39,923, but their initial bid did not include sales tax. Playmore, who was an original bidder a few years ago, was contacted, and their posture was unfriendly at best. They said they needed additional drawings of our existing playground since they have been to the site numerous times and they won't bid it again unless these demands were met. With all of that being said, the Sunshade Ad Hoc Committee feels Corecat is our vendor of choice at $31,815.85. You'll find their most recent proposal in the email that was sent to you, board members, by myself. Finally, both Corecat and Apollo agree that using sails as thermal and UV protection would not meet our intended outcome, and furthermore, pricing for sails would be in the $20,000 to $30,000 range more. The committee thanks the Sandoval Board of Directors for their faith in us in finding the most economical, aesthetically pleasing, and safe sunshade for our children. And with that, I know there's been some discussion on what this will look like. I made about 30 or 40 copies. There'll be 40 copies of the technical rendering of that. So if anybody would want that, we can hand that out to them
absolutely.
now. Or if you have any likings to see what this would look like, just grab one. If you don't care, I only made like 40 of them. Just pass that around, please. And what I'd like to keep it to 3 minutes, but just so for the board members, and I know some of the questions might have overlapped into what Al and Don had asked of the board. So what I'd like to do is just quickly go through some of those questions because that might answer some of yours also. And I know Don and Al had gone out to the sites and looked at those sites. I don't know if any other board members had, but that gives you, and Molly, and of course our board has too, and that gives you kind of an idea of what we looked at. And that was Gulf Elementary School. They were covering the basketball courts. The Westin Hotel down in the South Cape, they had sales, so that really wasn't applicable to what we needed. Lakes Park in Fort Myers, and then Paul Sanborn Park in Cape Coral was also. So getting into the questions, is it possible to add the shade structures to our existing pole on the Sandoval playground? Our playground has 6 vertical poles in the center and the playground structure. Speaking quickly with the sales reps, and they went back to their engineers, they will not attach any of their product to someone else's product because they don't know quality, consistency, and all of those things. So that from their engineers was a no. The desired shade footprint firm at 52 by 34 or 44 by 34 or something else. President Wells and myself had gone out there. We remeasured all the proposals, and we came up with the proposal that we were going with, which is going to be with CoreCat. And CoreCat's proposal is 44 by 34, and that really does meet our intended thermal and UV protection for the children. Is there any reason the swings are not included in the shade area? A good question, and both of our vendors that bid that said that there is actually a safety standard, that there's a swing arc and all of these other things, that you're too close to the existing the shade proposal there that we had proposed, so that would be a safety hazard. It wouldn't be allowed by code. Will the borders cover current grassy areas, and will landscape changes be necessary? There will be no landscape changes necessary, and just a very small portion of some of the grassy areas will be covered by the sunshade. Will the poles encroach on the existing walkway? No, they will not. Everything will be on the inside of the walkway. Will there be a safety issue with those walking on the paver sidewalk area? We do not foresee a safety issue with the poles since they are on the inside of the walkway. What is the plan for the height of the proposed shade? And if the plastic top is removed, will there be a safety issue with teens going to the top and swinging on the newly added canopy infrastructure? And again, I submitted the proposal to you, and that was addressed by CoreCat. It has to meet a certain safety standard, and I believe in their proposal, they said it was a 7 foot, and they met that, so there would be no way that somebody in their normal reach could get to that once that top is removed. Again, they have to meet constraints. It has to pass an inspection also. What is the procedure for removing and replacing the canopy during the storm? Both vendors told us that that's an option available to us, that we could either take it down ourselves, which is the easy part, and then the installation would have to be done by a vendor because everything's held in place by turnbuckles, and you have to get the correct tension on the sunshade. So that would be an additional cost to us during a storm if we did take it down, depending on, and storm, we look at a hurricane, and the project is rated 105 miles an hour for the fabric and 165, I believe, for the structure itself. What is the warranty for the infrastructure? Again, that's in your packet, 10 years on the fabric, 25 years on the structure itself. I saw rust and dull paint on metal poles at Lake Park. It was an Apollo sunshade. This is both manufacturers do a powder coating, and both tout to have the best in the industry. And they also provide their customers with a touch-up kit. So it's just like anything else that we would have in our home or anywhere else in this building that we're on. It requires maintenance, and we do have touch-up paint available to us in case it does get nicked. And again, if we're on that, that'll prevent any rusting to the product itself. When was the last time the vendors came to our location to evaluate the site? That was on May 23rd. Have the previous quotes received from Apollo by the Amenities Committee been reviewed and considered by the Sunshade Committee? Yes, they have been reviewed, and I have them here. And when the Amenities Committee had gone out to bid, they did their best in finding out what was available to them, and the quotes that they received were for sales. And again, in finding out, the sales do not provide the thermal and UV protection that we wanted, and that's why both vendors, when they heard what we were looking to achieve, recommended the hip roof design. What are the advantages to full coverage versus the sales? I just expanded on that. Once we determine the desired size and shape of the footprint, are we not obligated to get new bids for each vendor to determine the best value? When in my report, I did respond that Apollo has not gotten back to us, and I believe time is of the essence with this project here. It's been going on since the original amenities committee had looked at this, and if they choose not to address questions or telephone calls, as a business owner, that is their choice. We were tasked with a duty, and we will follow through with that. And Corcat and Apollo has said that since the May 23rd visit, they will honor that pricing. Have we compared the warranty and quality of materials on the two bids? Yes, we have. Is it permissible not to have a third? We did go to a third bid for Playmore, and I expanded on that in my minutes. Should we schedule a town hall to be sure that we have concurrence on the proposal we select? That's going to be up to the board if they want to have a town hall meeting. I believe our committee was tasked with a responsibility, and I believe that we have acted in the best interest of the community and done what we feel was appropriate in achieving our thermal and UV protection. And that's why I handed out some preliminary, well, that would be the drawing of what it does look like, and I also have a catalog up here that has some color renderings, and I also gave the addresses or the locations of where existing structures are, if residents would like to see those. Would a survey also be a viable means to determine community support and preferences? I'm not sure it would be viable. It could be done. I think the community has spoken loud and clear, and they are in favor of that. I think going out to a survey would just kind of muddy the waters a little bit, but again, that's a board decision if they want to go out to do a survey. So hopefully we answered as a committee all of the questions. If there are any other questions that board members have, I'd like to field those if you guys do have any questions as we move forward.
I do.
Yes.
In fact, I have a few, and I'd sent questions to you, but you only answered those for Al and for Don. I am very concerned because an RFP was not done, so apples to apples, exacting specifications were not given to each company that you solicited. You asked for bids from them, but you didn't give them exactly what we anticipated getting in size constraint, in height, and all of those things. I think you have more information now so that you could devise an RFP, but spending this kind of money really should require a board to consider the RFP, because you then are getting quotes on exactly the same thing from each company. And I understand your constraint in how they're not responding to you, but I also feel that they all were not bidding on exactly the same thing. There were different designs and different sizes that were going back and forth. The other one is that the site plan for the expansion has not been requested or looked at. The site, if we go forward with the expansion of the clubhouse, that building is going to be within 3.5 feet of where the poles are going to be and the sunshade is going to be. That would require, once building was to start, that you would have to take down the sunshades to be able to build the building. And it would just, let's give an example that you've decided this year that you're going to put a new cage in your backyard and extend your lanai. And then next year you say, oh, well, I really wanted a pool there, so now we have to dig up the cement and we have to take out the cage. We would be spending more money in taking things down as opposed to sitting down and working with the other committee to see how we could best come up with an idea that would incorporate less money because we could do the features together. I hate to see, not that I'm against a sunshade, that's not the issue. It is, if we go with this and we take a vote today without having a chance to have all of us sit down together and look at all these plans, that we're going to shortchange ourselves because we're going to have to spend a whole lot more money in taking things down to rebuild it, to build the building, and then perhaps be able to attach this. I think the cost would be far less being able to utilize the structure of the wall 3.5 feet away to help with the sail that, I'm using sail, canopy, for the sunshade. I think we should consider, as a board, looking at this in a different fashion so that we could, one, save money, and two, have the strongest structure for all involved. The height of the building may provide a significant amount of shade so that you do not have to have as much of a canopy as we are thinking we need right now. Those are all things that had not been taken into consideration. And it's not because your committee hasn't tried to do the right thing. I understand that. But there's just a lot more information out there that could add to that could change the components.
Okay, just to address a couple of things, and I'm going to have to defer to Jerry to this. Does Sandoval currently have an RFP policy?
I'd have to relook at the procurement policy that the finance committee is. It's so new, off the top of my head, I cannot tell you.
Okay, so any projects that have been done since January 1st, have they gone out for an RFP?
No.
Okay. The site plan, 3.5 feet, I'm not sure where that measurement came in, because if that's the case, then the perimeter walkway around the existing playground is going to have to be moved.
It goes right up to the perimeter walkway in several spots. That's what the PDP says. And we have the drawings that were presented to the city. So we would want you to take a look at that, because that really would be a contributing factor to how you design this.
Okay, so another question then would be, we're in the process of the expansion. If the expansion takes 2 to 3 years to do, we're not getting a sunshade for 2 to 3 years.
I think it all needs to be discussed thoroughly before a formal decision is made.
Okay, and then if the expansion goes out to another vote because it's either larger or costs more and it doesn't pass, we don't get a sunshade.
No, that's not what I said. I said I think that the whole board needs to look at this. You've done really well as a committee and brought a lot of information to us. But I think that there's more information that needs to be covered before we make a final decision on this. And I would hate to have it come up for a vote and fail, or potentially fail, because we didn't have all of the right information, or in another year and a half, then have to spend a lot more money to take something down to build something and then have to reconstruct this. Those are all types of things that we really need to consider. And it's not that I am against having shade for the playground. It's just that there's a lot more out there that we have to consider.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents worth.
That's all I have.
Any other discussion?
I have a question. There's a coffee shop on Cape Coral Parkway, Perkin Brew, and I was there just recently in the morning, and it was mentioned that if you used, and I don't know what material you plan on using, but they said if you use Sunbrella, it holds the rain, and then unless it's built in a way that it slopes so that the rain can run off, that it holds it, and then they decided not to use that kind of material, and they're using something that provides shade, but the rains can go through it. So I don't know what is planned with yours.
The fabric that they're using is not necessarily a Sunbrella fabric, because it's almost like this tablecloth and our umbrellas out there. Yes, they're more moisture sensitive, where you get the bowing in there. This is more of a heavy duty vinyl type fabric that is not a cloth per se. So what we're going to have is with the hip roof,
It's
just
gonna
like
be-
on your house, it's
it
going to
can-
be pitched and it's going to be under tension. So that fabric will not have the tendency to
Collect.
or, puddle water or mold and things like that from water sitting in there.
Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned the UV, and I thought the main objective of the shade was to reduce the temperature of the slide and the poles. And as far as UV and things of that nature, I didn't know that was in our criteria. I just thought that we needed something that will reduce the temperature of the playground so that it's not too hot when we're in the summer months when people would be going on the playground. So you eliminated the sails because it didn't meet your qualifications of UV, and I just wonder, what was our objective here with the playground? Was it to reduce the temperature, or is it to provide an area that has no sun, zero UV?
Well, the UV came in with the manufacturers when they gave us, and it's in their catalog here. When they gave us let's see, when you pick your color, which this is all new to me. When you pick your color, it gives you the percentage of shade and the percentage of UV block. So that's inherent with the fabric. So when you're blocking UV, you're also blocking temperature and the amount of shade it provides. It's a technical thing that they have here that was kind of new to me. I thought the lighter you go, the better off it is, but actually the darker you go, the cooler it is. So, and then again, they said don't fixate so much on a number that's a UV block of 94 versus a UV block of 93. That's pretty much the same ultraviolet block. But there are some that go down into the lower 80s, so you're not going to have UV protection. And again, UV protection, we buy shirts and everything. That's where you get sunburn. So a burn is a burn, whether it's a thermal burn, whether you touch it, or and that's what they're saying, or a sunburn itself. So that was all new to me going into this, that the shades do provide both of those things, thermal and UV protection. And just to kind of expand on what I didn't want to read it because it was in your packet, but the one vendor from Corcat expanded on shade sail, and he said one of the limitations of a shade sail is the necessity to have the lateral support, including wind loading, be carried by the shade fabric and supporting tension cables. Based on wind loads in South Florida, 140 to 150, shade fabric is limited to a continuous span on either side of up to 35 feet. Any dimensions beyond this threshold will either result in stretching or sagging of materials or a potential failure in the tension cables supporting the fabric. As well, the fabric will also need to have support columns that extend over 7 feet above the topmost playing platform as required by the National Playground Safety Standard. The perimeter support posts will need to be 16 feet at their lowest point, and in order to create interest in elevation changes, they will need to extend above this height to a total height of 20 feet. This height requires a substantial quantity of supporting steel that is or at above 12 inches in diameter. This significantly increases the cost and complexity of the installation and overall project. As well, any additional maintenance is more costly and presents a significant safety issue by requiring staff to be suspended over 20 feet in the air. Elevating the shade canopy to this height also reduces its shade footprint that is covered and maximizes the path and the travel length of the shade as the sun moves throughout the day and season. We've regularly seen cases where, due to elevation, the intended shade subject wasn't even covered by shade throughout the majority of the day. Given that your parks cater to year-round use and doesn't have time restrictions, it's recommended that a shade sail option not be used if you're looking for effective shade coverage versus ornamental shading. Although we have the option of creating a shade sail that fits your space, it is outside the bounds of what you requested in terms of cost, functionality, and future potential maintenance. So that to us was also just, again, coming from the experts. I'm not going to argue with them. I think it was pretty clear that, in their opinion, that shade sales versus the canopy is not the way to go.
Don,
Are
I think the discussion about UV is just a pleasant happenstance. It was not a request. It did not add expense. It was just, we were looking for the shade for the thermal, and the UV was just thrown in.
Okay. Do you have any locations where Corcat is in our area?
I have not gotten any locations for Corcat. They have not provided any for us. I can call them again and ask for.
Yeah.
I can do that.
The cost of reinstallation, do you have that?
Yes,
Good.
Yeah,
Can
that's on the-
could you provide that for us,
Yeah,
please?
that's on the bid.
that's on the bid. So
No, reinstallation.
yes,
Oh, reinstallation.
After the storm.
After a
the
storm
I think
That's
it's
or,
about
bid.
1,000, I think. Didn't you
Yeah,
say?
something like that.
I think it was like
I thought
It
it was
wa-
in the bid document.
Here's the way both of them bid it. One, Apollo SunGuard says that they use their own staff to do that. Depending on how big the structure is, anywhere between $750 and $1,000 with the reinstallation. Corcat uses a subcontractor, but it is their subcontractor that they use. It's the same person, and theirs is about $1,200, again, depending on the size. So if we look at both of them, it's going to be about $1,000 to reinstall. And again, we talked about this with them. When should you take it down? And both of them had actually said, we're not going to recommend that to you because it's your product. When we'll tell you what it's rated for. If you feel comfortable leaving it up for a tropical storm, 50-mile-an-hour winds, which they're made to sustain, that's up to us. But theirs is, when they talk take down, it's during a hurricane.
Right.
I don't want to be a stick in the mud,
No.
but I just, I'd like to see one, before I invest, $30,000 in the shade. And I know that takes more time, but, and the other thing is, at the last meeting, I was totally convinced from your presentation that Apollo was the best steel and everything was we were heading in that direction, and then, we've shifted gears.
Question, why this, in 3 weeks, why switching from Apollo to Corcat? Does Corcat have the structural steel? Do they use structural steel?
It's all by
like
code. They all have
Apollo?
to meet the same code. My whole thing is, listen, if you own a business and I'm soliciting you for a product or a service and we're spending this kind of money and you're not responsive to our committee's request, we move on. Again, we've been doing this for 3 months. I will give you your third courtesy call, which I've done. And after that, I've taken the position, and I think Bill as co-chair, we're going to move on and not, beg and borrow for a bid from you. If you want our $30,000 or $40,000, you will be responsive to us, which they were in the beginning, and they have yet to come through with the other questions and updated bids when Don and I went out and measured and things like that. So again, I'm not the kind of person to go out there and beg and grovel for you to take my money.
Where's their local rep? They're from Georgia.
Corcat?
Yeah.
Josh Verdome is a local boy. He's 239 area code, I believe. I think he was Fort Myers.
Okay. So he should be able to tell you there's some around here.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a call again and get a list of.
But wasn't the $40,000 bid from Apollo, wasn't that a different size?
It was.
So
It would be less than if it was a smaller
Yeah, I mean,
size. That was the largest
you're-
size, am I correct?
You're going down to $30,000 for Corcat, or 31, whatever it is. If we had got a smaller one from Apollo, maybe that would be this.
Sure, and if he
same
returned
price.
my phone call and bid it out when I sent it to him, he could have, I would have had the information for you tonight. But again,
Been there, done that.
been there, done, exactly. And again, I'm not trying to be standoffish, but again, there's only so much time that I'm going to invest in someone who doesn't want our money.
I've got a question. You mentioned the bid was in response to a budget parameter. What was the budget that was provided?
There wasn't a budget, they said a budget parameter, but we were looking at something, when we saw the initial bids 2 years ago for the sales that were in the $60,000 to $80,000 range, and they said, okay, we think sales are not the way to go. It's the hip roof. It's in that $30,000 to $40,000 range. So that's where both vendors were working with that. So we figured that would be,
freezing.
an area that both of them are coming into that area. So that was kind of like our wheelhouse for that pricing.
Would you consider having us sit down as a workshop so we could work through a few of these things and perhaps come up with a joint plan that could be as workable as possible to save as much money and to take into consideration the building process, so that the construction space and how much space they're going to need? Would you be willing to do that?
I'd be willing to go back to my committee and ask them if they'd be willing to invest more time and have a sit down with the rest of the board.
As a board, Jerry,
Yeah.
what is it called?
Workshop.
A workshop.
Yeah.
Could we do a workshop as a board on this
Yes.
to bring in so that you would know the schematics of what we're looking at with the PDP, and then you could have a better knowledge as you and your committee are discussing this.
I think we could try to do that within 2 weeks, and then that way, if there is a follow-up, maybe one more week, and that way at the next meeting, we can get this.
Would that workshop include input from the community?
Yeah, I would be more in favor of a town hall meeting than a private workshop.
Me too.
So if you call it a town hall meeting, I would.
Me too. That was on my list of 14 questions. Having a town hall and discussing it openly. And I'm really from Missouri and not from Missouri, but I need to see these things. I'll go out there and look at them.
Yeah. I'm very willing to go out and look at them too, because I did with all the others.
Well, I can tell you on item 18, I'm going to make a motion that we put this on the agenda to vote at the next meeting. So I think we should have a town hall meeting within the next 2 weeks so that we can be prepared at our next board meeting to proceed.
I think that's a fine idea.
I will look for your committee to give me the date for the town hall. Right. Thank you.
Date and time, or just date?
Date.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll be 6 o'clock.
that may well necessitate moving something else, but I think it's a very important issue that we can work around.
I think that one key issue is make sure that how this would affect an expansion if and when that takes place. I certainly realize we don't want to wait 3 years for a sunshade. I don't think that's appropriate. And I need to know within the next few days where one of these are, so we can go look at it.
Well, as we look forward to expansion, if we've got a sunshade out there, the plan that we would draw to expand the building could take that into effect so that it wouldn't be a conflict.
Well, that would just mean that we have X amount of space to
Right.
put the building in. And you do have to have a certain amount of construction area to be able to work around. And it might well necessitate, and this is not from an expert, but this is just from the top of my head, it might well necessitate taking down one slide during construction just to get the equipment in there. Because if it goes up to the point of, as it's planned now, up to the point of the walkway, you have to have room to get your construction equipment in there to be able to build a building and clear the land and put your scaffolding and what have you up. So those are all things that you really do need to take into consideration. I would not want to put the cart before the horse until we explored all of those ramifications.
So what you're saying has validity,
Yeah.
but I am a licensed general contractor, and I can tell you can build a 30-story building within 3 feet of another building. You just have to plan for that.
I would
But
like
we
to.
need to plan
I would
for
like
that.
to move on Bill's suggestion that we put this on the agenda for the next meeting for a vote.
It's not time to do that yet. But
And we need to move on. I just as a sideline, a couple across the street from me live in Paris, and they had their HOA meeting, and we have not set the record on the length of the meeting. Theirs was 5 hours. So with that thought, we
3
need to
minutes
move
didn't
on.
make it.
Clubhouse expansion plan.
Okay, I'm going to read the report. Okay, the PDP, or Planned Development Project, for the clubhouse expansion was presented to Ann Dalton, who is the Cape Coral City hearing examiner, on July 16th in the City Council chambers. Presentation was made by staff, the city staff, and our project engineer, Steve Darby, who lives in Sandoval and works with and for Greg Gersdorf, who is the architect. Present were board members Molly Knotts, Ron Spooner, Bill Tubb, myself, General Manager Jerry Evans, and architect Greg Gersdorf. Mike Struve, who is the DCD staff member in charge of planning, also asked that a right-of-way street sidewalk requirement that had originally been planned in Ordinance 20-12-12 along an area next to the Coralina Apartments be deleted because that property was originally planned to be a commercial shopping center requiring this right-of-way improvement. With the apartment complex, this is no longer needed or required. The hearing examiner took about 5 or 6 days to respond to the city, and what she said was she approved the PDP, but requests that council also approve the right-of-way is not needed. The PDP will be presented to council with the first hearing toward the end of August and final hearing early September. Then the next step will be the presentation and approval of a site development plan. And I want to add to that our expansion committee has spent this time, these last weeks, months, looking at reconstructing what has been done so that we can deal with next steps. We have to know the history before we can move forward. I did find out today that because the Sandoval project was filed many years ago, this PDP change was the 7th change. So therefore, if it were brand new, if it was a new project, then it would have to be done, construction would have to be mostly completed within 2 years. But because this is an add-on or a change to what was previously approved, we have up to 10 years to do an expansion, which I thought nobody's going to look very favorably on taking 10 years. But that was what was provided to me today. I also asked about, since the parking lot by the tennis courts looks to be approved by the board, and also parking for the newest dog park, I asked whether that could be done in a timely fashion. And I was told, again by an email today, that they didn't see any need for a PDP change, that it would just be a site development plan, and then we could move forward with that.
Oh, good.
So that's my report.
Great. Thank you, Marilyn. Taylor Morrison, litigation.
The litigation committee is very pleased with the addition of Morgan & Morgan attorney Paul Sangiovanni. The litigation committee worked very hard, very diligently to research multiple attorneys to find the best counsel that would represent our interests. The committee met with Paul individually roughly a half a dozen times. Paul, as he stated, has extensive trial experience, including a substantial judgment against Taylor Morrison. Morgan & Morgan has agreed to enter into a shared risk agreement, which is also known as a contingency fee agreement with Sandoval. It is important to note, though, that there are costs for experts and other expenses associated with litigation that we are responsible for. So there is inherent financial risk to us. That said, the litigation committee, and with the blessing of the board, feels that Paul gives our community the best chance to be successful. We are looking forward to working with Paul and his team, and we're very optimistic going forward. Thank you.
I might add one comment that he told us that if he felt that it was not a viable chance of collecting, that he would tell us prior to going through all the procedures.
Yeah, he's not going to want to invest
His time and not make anything on it either, so.
So we do have a shared interest going forward.
All right, capital improvement projects.
The Capital Improvement Committee met at the Clubhouse on July 22nd. All committee members were in attendance. Since this was our first time together, we began by discussing our responsibilities to management and the board. The capital improvements that we later discussed were repairs to the community border chain link fence, the concrete fence or wall, as well as a Happy Paws dog park parking lot and additional clubhouse parking. Todd Frey agreed to contact vendors pertaining to immediate concrete fence repairs and also eventual replacement of the wall. Also, Linda Mooney will be contacting vendors concerning the parking lots.
And I think one thing that I want to mention that you'd mentioned to me is that you have found out who the vendor is who built this wall, so that possibly that type of material might still be available.
Well, that vendor went out of business in, I believe it was 2009.
Right, but you have someone that...
But somebody bought the equipment. They have the original molds, so we could duplicate exactly the wall that we have if we want that.
Right, right.
Is there an anticipated timeline for repair of the cement wall?
We just started looking into it, so it depends what they come back with. I know you're in a hurry to get it done.
Well, I think October 31st is a year.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Whatever, we're just contacting the companies, and they'll let us know. And we want the repairs done immediately.
Well, thank you.
There's two places where the wall has been repaired with plywood, and we would like those locations repaired ASAP.
Yep. Thank you. The next item is an old business item. We discussed last month the Somerville Lake aerator maintenance. And, yep.
As a recapturing and for the audience, at the May board meeting 2 months ago, representatives from Somerville addressed the board of directors regarding if Sandoval would have plans to include Somerville's lake aerator maintenance in their budget and to assume responsibility for future repair and replacement. So last month at the June board meeting, this was on the agenda for deliberation, but the board's consensus was to wait until the July meeting when all members were present. And as a recapturing of the situation, at the February 14th, 2019 meeting, Board of Directors meeting, the Lake Committee made a report to the board. Board President Joe Kilrain responded to the Lake Committee report with information on plans for the future approval of a lake aeration project, and this began at the 1:13:05 mark of the meeting recording on the website. In his response, Joe stated that the proposal will include all 17 lakes and will only admit 2 lakes that feed into lakes outside of our property. Joe then said the proposal will include the Somerville Lake and the maintenance and repair as per the resolution council is preparing. Well, the lake aeration resolution is prepared by council that was in the board's pack. It does not specifically call out Somerville Lake, rather it just states all common area lakes. Then I called our attorney and spoke to him, and he prepared the resolution and informed me the resolution's intention related to the term common area was for Sandoval's Master Association common area, not Somerville's common area. And it's also included in the board pack for reference the February 2019 meeting minutes where there's no specific mention to Somerville's lake related to maintenance. And as a further recapturing, it was clearly the intent, in my opinion, of the board of directors per Joe's statement that Sandoval will assume repair and maintenance responsibilities of Somerville's lake aeration system. However, there's no such commitment in the lake aeration resolution or in the minutes. If the board desires to assume repair and maintenance responsibilities for Somerville's lake aeration system, a board vote will be necessary. However, if there is not such a desire, a vote will not be necessary. And then the one thing I would like to add is one of our board members, I think it was Don Wells, brought up the idea that I thought was pretty fair, that if the board took over the maintenance and responsibility of future replacement of the aeration system, that they buy a new one, because it was installed. Their board told me around 2007, so it's getting ready for its useful life to end, and we certainly, be questionable to take over an asset when we have to replace it in the next year or so. So that's definitely worth considering in the decision you make.
Okay, is there a discussion?
I'll just add that it was my understanding, and correct me wrong if I'm wrong, Jerry, that by taking over the aeration maintenance, there will be a benefit from the synergy of having one company oversee all the maintenance, and there will be some savings on that. Is that correct or incorrect?
I would say that's correct, yes.
Okay, is it also correct that the maintenance company that we will be employing will be able to maintain their older equipment?
Yes.
Okay, those are my two questions.
Marilyn?
I have a question. Do they have anything in their reserve account that goes toward that lake aeration?
I would think they would, because it would be on their asset list, and I would think they would have already accumulated the money to purchase a new one.
Okay.
So I actually talked to Don about that a few days ago, and would it be the option of buying a new one or giving us the funds, because I thought the same thing. Certainly they have it.
Yeah.
At least 80% of it, you would think, at that useful life period.
So I think before we vote, don't we need to find that out?
I don't necessarily think so. I think that would be an option we could give Somerville if we wanted them to fund it.
See, your statement that they would do the maintenance on their equipment at the price that he quoted you on the old equipment, I mean, I think it requires different kind of maintenance.
Okay, well,
And I think the fee was related to, they gave you the fee of what a new aerator would cost, and then how that would add to our maintenance agreement, rather than maintaining their piece of equipment.
Yeah,
I'm not sure on that.
I think I'm not either, because what I did is I called the contractor and I told him our situation and asked him if he could maintain them, and if he could, how much would he charge us? Whether he assumed it would be a new aerator, I can't.
I mean, they're
answer
paying
that.
$1,100 to, isn't that correct?
Is there a Somerville?
Yeah, and then what we're being quoted is 4. So there's a huge difference. I mean, there's quite a savings, for that to be included. But, I don't want the responsibility for the master HOA to replace your aerator when it's past its expected life expectancy.
You're adding aerators to 17 lakes already. 16 lakes, excuse me. Why not make it 17?
If you'll provide the funding, I think we could include
We
it.
are providing the funding.
Then I don't agree with that.
We've already contributed 14% to the telecommunications fund that we're planning to utilize for the existing aeration installation.
Do you have that in your reserve account to replace that aerator?
We do not.
Well, then that seems like that is probably your reserve is underfunded.
If I could just chime in here and go back when I was still on the Lakes Committee, I think the whole genesis of this back in the day, and it's no disrespect to the Somerville folks, but as a Lakes Committee member, I was under the impression, I can speak for anybody, I was under the impression that when this did happen, when everything was installed in the common area master HOA lakes, that we were going to take over the maintenance of the existing system. That's what we understood it to be. Nothing else other than taking over the maintenance. Now, just as looking at it as technology, they have, without a doubt, the most healthy lake in the community. So their aerator is functioning at its peak, let's just say. So whether it has a year left or 10 years left, I just have a problem replacing something that is still functioning and working, and it's nothing against Somerville. It could be, well, the air conditioner here in this building is reached its life expectancy. That doesn't mean it's going to fail tomorrow. We could get 10 more years out of it. Are we going to replace it? No, we'll replace it when it fails. So no disrespect to the Somerville folks, but again, why would you take out a functioning system just because we're doing the rest?
I think the point is who's going to pay for it when it fails? Or when it's time to replace it? That's the question I think we as a board from the master HOA needs to make.
Our contract for maintenance on the new system that we're going to be putting in the remaining lakes of Sandoval is how much per year?
20.
Per lake.
It's twice a year. It's a 6-month. I can tell you, I think. It's right here. The aeration was $29.04 semi-annually, and we asked them if we did a 3-year contract with them, and I think there was a reduction.
There was.
That's semi-annually, so it's $6,000
A year?
A year.
For how
Round
many
figures.
lakes?
Well, for everything,
I know.
all the other. How many lakes?
No, that was an erroneous number back then. It's 23.
It's 11 aeration systems.
And some of them cross through.
Correct. There are
But-
more than
but-
one's coming. It's
The
for 11 aeration systems, including the sales tax, it's $3,092, so we're $6,200.
All right, so $6,200 a year for what we have now. What would if we would proportionately add one more and pay for the maintenance of that, and then have Somerville at the replacement period when theirs fails, can they put that type of maintenance contract in, or does it have to be all the same
No,
type of?
if I would think if your statement is that they would maintain that one for that 200, it would maintain a new one for the same. So I'm in favor of and this is me speaking. This is not speaking for the board. Taking over the maintenance, because I think we've talked about that. But I don't want it to take over the responsibility of replacement.
At any point in time is basically what we're talking about. That'll be their sole system, and we're just going to take care of the maintenance of their system in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to make sure.
Well,
So. Okay.
And that would go forward for future aerators also?
Well, what is the feeling?
When we were given the board pack to vote on that, the board pack did not indicate that it was the Somerville Lake. When it was mentioned, and I was taking notes at that meeting, it was, wait a minute, how did I not see that? Well, I didn't see it because it wasn't there.
No one on the board was asked that.
No one on the board was asked that question, because we voted on the resolution itself. So with that being said, we weren't voting on, no matter what the verbiage was outside of the resolution, we voted on the resolution. I think that it's only fair that they provide the system.
How many board members were present and voted on that resolution?
I would have to go back and look at the
believe they
notes.
were- I believe-
The way it was spoken was that we were voting on the resolution.
Right, but my question is, when he sat there and made those promises,
We were
nobody said, wait a minute, Joe, I don't think
we
that's
were
right.
voting on this proposal.
But during his presentation,
His presentation, he said it includes the maintenance and repair.
and nobody called him on that.
Yep, didn't say about the aerator, but the maintenance and
Maintenance
repair.
and repair.
And I'm in favor of doing that.
Well, but I can tell you on that tape, on that video, he said when it's time to replace it, we will replace it as well.
Well-
He made that comment. I can guarantee you that.
I believe you because I was at that. And I said I heard that 2 meetings ago.
I think maybe we should table this and we should all watch that video so that next month we can make an informed decision based on having reviewed that video and knowing what's on it.
I would also like to know if the $400 maintenance is for the existing aerator. I think that's a fair
Yeah, I
question.
think we need to know
Is-
that for sure.
Is that a month or a year?
That's a
No,
year.
it's
$200
It's 200 twice.
Twice, 6 months,
And
okay.
that's essentially the same cost as the other 17 aerators, which leads to the question,
That's what I was
Right.
getting, yeah.
right?
Which shows the synergy by taking it over the
But
value.
I think theirs requires
I
more
thought we just said
maintenance.
11 aerators.
Well, there's 11 aerators.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so it's $6,000,
17
11
tanks,
aerators, it's about $550 a year.
Yeah.
So it's actually cheaper than ours.
Smaller one.
Yeah, they have a single station, right, exactly. It's a single station pump. So, but if you look at, and again, I don't know the manufacturer and what is exactly in their cabinet or under the water, I can say that since their system is that old, their
Can the
tubing,
audience be quiet, please? We're having a hard time up here. Thank you.
their tubing and things to the aerator probably aren't of the quality that we have
I
bid.
would think the technology
The
is
technology is totally different. So long term, if the board did decide that maintenance and replacement was the way they wanted to go, it would probably actually be cheaper because now we're going to have like equipment out there. Because if a hose goes bad and that's included in maintenance, that hose might actually cost us more than if we had installed the system when it failed. And I'm only talking in a failure mode, not removing and replacing something that's already functioning.
Well, I'm making a motion that we table this until the next meeting so that we can all review that tape, that video, and we can make a decision based on what was said at that video.
Yeah, I don't think we voted on that. I think we voted on the
Oh,
bid
absolutely.
pack here.
You voted on the resolution,
Right.
but Joe made promises.
Well, the Joe made personal promises, not necessarily board promise.
But I think we should review.
And the resolution says repair and maintenance. Is that?
That's
how-
correct.
Just strictly repair and maintenance.
Which money are we talking about?
$6,500, I think, is a new system for their lake.
At some point in time, because we don't know when that 6,500
Right.
might be
Exactly.
necessary.
Exactly. Okay, so let's move on to the next item.
Well,
This is
hold-
going to be
hold on a
tabled.
minute.
Do we need to vote on the table?
Do you have
You
to
want to
vote
vote on the table? Okay, all
You
in
moved
favor
it.
of
No,
table?
no, we have to have a second. So it has been moved by Bill
No,
to
it's
table the
second.
conversation to the August meeting. We would need a second. If we don't-
Second.
No second, fails.
To table it until then, till we get to review the document that we see fit, and then vote on it then. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, collection policy amendment.
At the June 27th, 2019 board meeting, the board approved a collection policy. The policy failed to address thresholds and suspension of owners on an approved payment plan. My recommendations are as follows and are within the revised collection policy on the next page. On thresholds, sending accounts to the attorney. The approved collection policy requires accounts more than 60 days delinquent to be sent to the attorney for collections. My recommendation is to establish a threshold of $500 or greater for that activity. Accounts less than $500 will continue to be collected through leasing, amenity card suspensions, and vehicle suspensions. We currently have one homeowner, and then depending on how you vote on it tonight, potentially 44 more.
Is this for HOA too?
Correct. Collection thresholds, account suspensions. The approved collection policy requires accounts more than 90 days delinquent to be suspended from leasing their home, suspension from vehicle access decal, and suspension of common area access cards. My recommendation is to establish a threshold of $50 or greater for that activity. This threshold aligns with the threshold Pope uses for sending late letters to delinquent accounts. And then on payment plans, I recommend the following language to be added. Owners on a payment plan will not be suspended from leasing their home, will not have their vehicle access decals suspended, and will not have their common area access cards suspended as long as they remain in good standing and abide by the terms of their payment plan. Failure to remain in good standing and abide by the terms of the payment plan will cause the owner to immediately be suspended from leasing their home, suspension of vehicle access decal, and suspension of common area access cards.
Do we have a motion to accept this plan?
So moved.
Do we have a
Jerry,
second?
I think,
Do we have a second? You have to
Second.
I'll
second.
second
the
before
discussion.
discussion.
Okay, second for discussion. Do you have a second? Yes. Okay.
Okay,
Is there
so
any
Bill moved.
discussion?
yes. I think we should, I think that we should divide these three different things out and not have them all as one lump sum.
You can make 3 separate motions, that's fine.
That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to get at before we moved to.
Well, that's this discussion.
Okay. So that would, I would like to see it amended to bring it into 3 separate motions.
Is that a motion?
It is indeed.
Okay, then
Se-
what? Well, you got to get a second, and then Scott has to agree
Agree to amend
to
the
amend.
motion.
That's
And
correct.
then I have to
Correct.
agree
Right.
to amend my motion.
Yes.
So, yes.
Okay, so do we have a second for the amendment? Okay. Do we all in favor of
I'll agree to
amending?
amending the amendment
Okay.
that
Yeah.
amended the
Okay.
And
amendment.
We
I'll
all
agree to
agree to
amend
that.
the motion.
Yeah.
Now, we want to separate these if we agree. Okay, so what's the first one?
I think the motion can be as written after you, is starting with the word establishment, so if someone wants to make that motion.
Could you read that again,
Yeah,
please?
so the board's looking for a motion to establish a threshold of $500 or greater for sending accounts to legal. That would be the motion,
And that would be at the 60-day mark?
correct?
Okay.
Also move.
Okay, and a second to that?
Slow down, because I'm fast, but I'm not that fast, Bill. So Bill moved?
I move that establish a threshold of $500 or greater for submitting delinquent accounts to the attorney for collections,
60 days or later.
60 days or later.
I will second that motion.
Okay, discussion?
Would it make sense to push the threshold amount a little bit above what the quarterly dues are?
We're at 60 days. I mean, I don't,
Just a,
But the quarterly dues are for 90 days, so they could still be just delinquent on their current assessment.
that's the board decision. I mean,
I think that's where you're coming from, isn't it?
yes.
So you're suggesting that they be 587?
Or 6?
600? Might be more efficient, but
yeah, I agree. We're only talking $100.
Okay, but then you have to have a motion to amend.
Molly seconded. Do you agree to the amendment?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, then is there a second to amend it to 600 from 500?
So this will
Okay,
make it,
so-
this is the third amendment or the fourth amendment? Are we,
This
because
is second.
Second.
We amended,
Second.
the first
But it
amendment
was
was
to
to
an
break them
amendment.
up.
Yeah,
Second
okay, so
amendment,
now,
break that
a
off.
discussion on changing it to $600. Is there any
For-
discussion?
For accounts over 60 days
Yes,
old.
yes.
Turning them over to the
Okay,
attorney.
there being no discussion, that would call for a vote on amending the number from 500 to 600. All in favor? Okay, so the motion now reads 60 days, $600,
Greater than 600.
greater than $600, and that is the new. Is there discussion? Okay, then let's have a vote on $600, 60 days,
to attorney.
going to the account. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that, number one, $600. Number two,
Establishing, I don't want to read this.
Okay.
Sending account, or suspension of accounts 90 days delinquent or greater at a threshold of $50. But I think the motion also should include what's being suspended, leasing their home, suspension of vehicle access decals, and suspension of common
Okay,
area access.
I'll move that we establish a policy where homeowners who are more than 90 days delinquent be suspended from leasing their home, suspension of vehicle access decals, and suspension from common area cards. Of $50 or greater?
50. Greater than $50.
Greater than
Greater than
$50.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor of this proposal? That passes. Okay, now what's the third one?
Owners on a payment plan will not be suspended from leasing their home, will not have their vehicle access decals suspended, will not have their common area access cards suspended as long as they remain in good standing and abide by the terms of their payment plan.
But these are people that are 90 days delinquent because they've gone to the collections.
These are people who are 60 days plus because they've gone to legal.
Right.
Okay. Is there a second to this for discussion?
Who made the motion?
Nobody's made it,
Is it
nobody's moved it yet.
Okay, but
Somebody else has turned to
But
make
I
the
don't
motion.
think the motion should include the 60 days because theoretically, someone could know they're in big trouble and ask for a payment plan
Yeah.
in advance.
That's- I'm not in
So
favor of
moved
pay-
with that 60-day.
Okay, so
hold on.
we need the motion.
This gets complicated, guys. Okay.
Well, it does,
so-
because this is Robert's rules for you.
Yeah. Scott moved to allow people to have their ability to have a
No,
decal.
He just added the 60 days. That's what it was to amend that initial. That's what all I was doing.
I was just saying that motion should not include the 60 days. And Scott was agreeing, but I didn't.
Oh, no, we're on two different pages. No, I'm not agreeing to your initial reading.
Well,
of
and the
number
reason
3.
is because people that might be less than 60 would still want to get on a payment plan, and we want to allow that.
Well, I'd like to discuss it, but we haven't had.
Okay.
You gotta have a motion
Motion
first.
or a sec, so yeah, I think there's a lot of people chomping at the bit on this one.
Okay, so we're going to make a motion that people over 60 days on a payment plan would not lose their privileges. Isn't that basically?
As long as
Well,
it's
not
good,
60.
in good standing.
People on a payment plan, forget the 60
Oh,
days.
on a payment plan.
Yeah. As long
Forget
as-
the 60 days.
That is correct.
I'm just going to make that motion to get it to discussion.
Okay.
Not saying I agree with the but
Okay, so is there a second to the motion for the payment plans?
Yes. I'll
Yes,
second.
okay, all right, now that's open for discussion.
Go ahead,
Scott
Molly.
moved. Scott, you moved. Who second?
I did.
Marilyn.
Yeah.
Okay. I have real consternation with allowing people to have the privileges when they're not paying for, even though they're on a payment plan. They've known for at least 60 to 90 plus days that they are not paying their dues. And all the rest of the members of the community who are in good standing and who pay their dues have the privilege of using the pool, using the Envira sticker to get in and out of the community. This does not mean that a person cannot get in and out of the community who is in default of their dues. They just have to wait in line like all the other visitors to get in and out of the community. But for those of us who have paid our dues regularly and are in good standing, it is not fair to all of them to allow other people who can drag out for months and months and even years, because we've seen it in the past happen, get to use their privileges because there's no incentive for them to pay.
Okay, so Molly's-
Who structures the payment plan?
That's
So-
the attorney,
So
and the person who's,
I will correct something you said. What we already approved was the debt had to be paid within the fiscal year of the debt. So
Okay,
it
but
won't extend out.
but still, it's a whole year. I'm,
Okay, Molly's speaking against the amendment. Is anybody in favor of the amendment, would like to speak towards it?
I think I just heard what will satisfy me, because you said the payment has to be received within the fiscal year.
That's correct.
Then
So for instance, if they were late on their fourth quarter and they wanted a payment plan, they'd only have a 2-month payment plan.
But
if
if we're up for discussion, here's a question. And I realize that people sometimes do fall under hard times, and that's unfortunate. But I would think just by looking at our delinquencies, I'm pretty sure a lot of the big ticket ones, they're cognizant of the fact that they're not paying their dues on purpose. So if we put them on a payment plan and they skip a month, then what happens? Do we take it away from them? And that becomes a logistical nightmare. You're on, you're off, you're on, you're off. I agree with Molly. Listen, we have an obligation here in a deed restricted community to pay our HOA dues, And sometimes people fall on hard times, but you know what? If you're going to pay it within the year, then you'll be restored within that year with your rights and privileges. So I can't disagree with that for the folks who do pay on time.
And the only issue there is if someone falls on hard times and they just physically do not have the money, that debt is going to increase exponentially because we are going to send them to the attorney and there's going to be additional charges. Just keep that in mind when you make your decision.
I'm really cognizant of that fact, and I you know, you can't make exceptions for this person, that's so convoluted. But again, I've looked at who owes what, and when you're $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in the rears, you know, you've purposefully done that. I mean, it's just for me. I agree with Molly.
But here's the thing, and I'm just saying one more thing. If someone owed $5,000 or $6,000, $7,000, why wouldn't we agree to a payment plan to get it paid this year? If that's going on for so long, at least we get the
This
money.
discussion is not about accepting a payment plan. This is talking about the privileges under a payment
Correct.
plan.
I agree.
So that
They can
has
go
no-
on the payment
That
plan,
discussion
and we-
doesn't have anything to
Right.
do with this.
Correct. It's just about.
I thought that that the motion meant that as long as they're in good standing means making your payments. If you stop making your payments, then it comes due. You no longer have the option of a payment plan. Is that not what you're talking about? Or is it?
No, you're on a payment plan. Do you get all your privileges once you sign up for a payment plan?
So you
But
come,
if you miss a payment,
Well,
like
if
the
you do.
IRS, you're no longer on a payment plan.
You're no longer on it.
Yeah. Well,
So, okay.
but there's an incentive to get the bill paid if you don't have privileges. There is no incentive if you get all the privileges and it doesn't matter where you pay if you don't care about being in debt.
But if you fall off and you don't make payment, that's when you lose your privileges, I would think.
Well,
I think you lost your privileges when you didn't pay.
Once you've hit the 90-day period, we have voted that you lose your privileges. This is now saying, okay, now it's gone to the attorney. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith go to the attorney and say, okay, I'd like to set up a payment plan, and this is what I'm willing to pay to get it paid off within the year or whatever. I want my privileges back. They still are in default, and it isn't fair to every single person in the community who has paid their dues to have someone who doesn't pay them get the same privileges as you do. So I guess it needs, now that it's brought up, it needs to come to a vote.
Okay, is there any other discussion?
What happens if they're on a payment plan and they miss the next quarterly assessment?
Mm-hmm.
Does that be treated as a separate debt that would
Oh, you're still.
have
Well,
to
they're
go
not in good
to
standing
the
on the
attorney,
payment
or would
plans.
that cancel the payment?
it would cancel the payment plan.
So therefore, they've got an incentive
To pay.
make their payments and complete the payment plan, or they will lose their privileges within 90 days because the next quarter comes due.
Jerry, is monitoring this laborious from a staff perspective?
Monitoring payment plans would be the attorney's responsibility, and the person on the payment plan would have to pay that. The issue Scott brought up would be the only a manual task we have, which is
It would add
turning people
logistics
on and
if you-
turning people off of
Right.
the access.
If they're off, they're off. Yeah,
So,
it's off
and
off.
again, the fee structure, so the attorney's going to get a portion of, I'm sure of
It'll be
that.
an addition, it'll
In
be a
addition.
fee.
In
In
addition
addition.
to.
That is
So even if they didn't pay and it goes to a cloud on their title when they close, we'd still get it. This is just a way of getting
That's
the whole
correct.
thing quicker than before closing on a.
Okay, so are we ready to vote? We're going to vote that if you're on a payment plan, are you in favor of restoring the privileges? That's the vote. All those in favor of restoring privileges if you're on a payment plan signify by raising your hand. Those who are opposed to restoring your privileges if you're on a payment plan, raise your hand and they're against.
Okay, so we
Okay.
need to have.
5-2.
Yeah, that's okay.
Votes 5-2. Okay, so we've solved that, and we're going to the next item, which is delinquent accounts to attorney.
At the June 27th board meeting, the board approved a collection policy authorizing accounts more than 60 days delinquent to be sent to the attorney for collections. Your next page is a delinquent report. On page 2, highlighted in yellow, is one owner with a delinquency of 500 aged over 60 days. Additionally, there are 44 accounts highlighted in blue that are over 90 days that have balances greater than 500. So all of those are 500 or greater, more than 60, and all should be sent to the attorney, and that is.
Well, we just changed that to
We
six.
just changed it to
600.
6.
600.
So if any of those on there are,
So what you can do, make the motion to go 600
600.
or greater. We don't require the account number, and because here's the other thing too, and this is in discussion, but after the board votes on it, we will go back to accounting and check to see if between the time the board pack has been drawn up
We
and
made a payment.
the decision made, we will confirm accounts before we send them to the attorney.
okay, so all in favor of sending accounts over?
We have to have a motion.
Okay, well then let's have the motion. I'm stating what the motion
Oh,
should
okay.
be. The motion would be if, are we in
all-
favor of sending accounts over $600 to the accountant for delinquency?
To the attorney.
Attorney.
To the
Yeah,
attorney.
that's right, the accountant. Check with the attorney, check with the accountant, send him to the attorney.
You got it.
Okay.
Second, or I'll
No,
move the motion.
I'm just stating
Yeah,
it.
you can't make.
I can't
I'll
make a
move the
motion.
And I will second it.
Okay. Discussion. All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Okay. All right. Next one?
Okay, the next one, at the June 27th meeting, the board approved a collection policy authorizing accounts more than 90 days delinquent to be suspended from leasing their home, suspension of vehicle access, decal, and suspension of common area access cards. Early in the board meeting, the board approved the threshold of $50 or greater. Actually, it's 50. It's greater than 50. And your next page is a delinquent report. On page 2, highlighted in blue, are 48 owners with a delinquency of $50 or greater than $50, aged over 90. So what I'm going to do is ask for the board to make the same motion. All accounts aged over $50, or greater than $50, aged 90 days or greater, to suspend from leasing their home, vehicle access decal, and suspension of common area access cards.
I so move.
Second? Okay. Discussion.
So
All
in
in-
essence, you're saying someone who hasn't paid the prior quarterly assessment
Yeah.
will have their privileges suspended.
90 days.
Well, that, an assessment is for 90 days, isn't it? Every 3 months.
If you haven't paid your
So if your assessment's due January 1st and you haven't paid it by April 1st, your privileges will be suspended.
correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's
Yeah,
what we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. All in favor of that motion, signify by raising your hand. All opposed? Okay.
Unanimous?
Yes.
Not a motion, but
Right.
does the association send people a letter saying you're
Yes.
Oh, yes.
okay? So it's not like it's going to be a surprise to
That's
somebody.
correct.
I forgot to send my check in, and
Yeah,
that's
by
correct.
that time, they've received 2, 3 letters. After
Yeah,
after
they wouldn't
15
be
days it
surprised.
is,
Okay.
after 30 days, after 60 days.
Okay.
Okay. Next item.
Fines are currently being conducted for gate strikes and deed restriction enforcement violations. Gate strike fine recommendations are in your board pack on the next page. Due to the high volume of deed restriction violations, we're about 850 right now. An initial effort was made to reduce the number of violations prior to fines being imposed, just from a logistics standpoint, to be able to keep up with it. In part, this was done to provide homeowners fair notice that the HOA has re-engaged with consistent enforcement activity, thus an opportunity to resolve violations prior to fines being imposed. Efforts were also made to reduce the number of violations prior to fines being imposed due to the potential number of fines and hearings and limited meeting space to hold the hearings. The manner this effort has been made to reduce the number of violations prior to fines being imposed was through the exclusive use of friendly reminder letters. That initial grace period of sorts has ended. Effective July 23rd, upon re-inspections, the more formal second violation letter is being utilized. Upon re-inspection of a second violation, fines are recommended to the board and sent to the finding committee for a hearing. On August 21st, the finding committee will meet for the first time. Their first meeting and set of hearings will comprise of all of the gate strike fines detailed on the next page. On September 18th, the finding committee will meet for their second time and begin hearings related to the violations that have not been cured after a second notice was sent. That will comprise of violations noted from July 23rd through approximately August 14th. This protocol will then continue on a routine monthly basis throughout. For reference and for the board to have more information about enforcement activity, I included in your board pack the past 6 weeks of violation activity.
So what are you wanting?
So I'm asking for a motion to fine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all of the 10 gate strikes listed in your board pack, $100. Also made a note that one of these folks had $351.45 of damage through Envera, and we are charging them separately. It is not a part of the $100 fining process.
Okay.
Slow down, I'm trying to get all of it written down.
We can do that during discussion if you want.
Well, it's not taking.
Okay. So it's an addition of 351.45?
That will not be a part of the motion and will not, it was just
It
a,
will not be
it was
part
just
of
a
the motion.
discussion I was letting you
Okay.
know.
Okay. And we need a motion for those in favor of the finding of the individuals with the great strikes.
I'll make a motion.
Second? Okay, discussion.
Where does the sign come in that says $500?
So that sign was put up early on, and the state legislation only allows us to fine $100.
They're paying the damages.
Okay, all in favor of the motion of the $100 fine, signify by raising your hand.
Me? Okay.
Go ahead.
I have a
You have
question.
more, you had more discussion?
Yeah. Does this limit our ability in any capacity, Jerry, to make sure that we're whole in terms of damages also?
Well, the way I think we're going to need to approach that is more from a civil matter, to where if someone doesn't pay us, I'll go and file small claims against them.
So for matters of this vote, our only option is to do a maximum fine of $100.
That's correct.
Okay.
But that's for hitting the gate, that's not repairs. The
Right.
repairs
That's
is a
just
separate
strictly
issue.
fine for-
Gotcha.
To come and set the arm.
But pursuing the actual damages will be
addition to.
undertaken.
In addition to.
Okay.
Correct. If a
Thank
homeowner
you.
hits the gate, we can assess them for that, but again, it won't be part of the $100.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, now is everyone ready for voting? Okay, all in favor?
Are we
Opposed?
unanimous?
Okay, that passes. Okay, the next item is electronic voting resolution. Ron, I'm going to ask you to speak to this and set the and make a motion.
Yes, sure. I move to the board to authorize electronic voting.
Okay. And that's in your pack and all the forms and the forms to fill out if you want to be on the list to vote electronically. If this is approved, all those forms will be put on the website, I would assume, yeah?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a second to Ron's
I'll
motion?
second.
Is there any
Second, Al.
discussion?
There are a couple points that I wrote down, if you wouldn't mind entertaining me.
Nope.
First off, I want to make it clear there is no legal question in terms of the board's authority to implement electronic voting. It's a board decision. We have a written legal opinion from our counsel, Becker Poliakoff, that the use of electronic voting is within the discretion of the board. And I want to note that this is the same counsel that we've used for the previous 3 years. Our counsel stated that electronic voting will likely increase voter turnout. 551 homes did not vote in 2018. I know personally many residents could not vote because they were traveling, living in other states, and electronic voting will allow these residents to vote. There's also a large convenience factor for many residents. Also, electronic voting will likely save money. Our attorney stated it would likely save money. For example, the hours spent counting votes, our attorney has to be present for that, and he basically bills us per hour. So if we save 1 hour, that will pay for electronic voting. But the cost savings don't end there. Residents who prefer electronic voting can opt out from paper mailing. That should save costs associated with supplies and postage. We've also had instances of paying collectively over $100 to send and receive single ballots from overseas. It's also staff resources. Electronic voting will save staff with having to assemble and mailing additional packets. Now, the question of security has been raised. Our counsel stated that electronic voting is more secure than paper ballots. He stated there was never an instance that he was aware of electronic voting ever being compromised. The service offered by our counsel has the same security as your bank, your online banking. I'd also note it would be a federal crime to hack or to compromise electronic voting. Electronic voting increases the fairness and the accuracy of our election. And I'll also note that electronic voting is in addition to paper ballots. You will have the option to choose. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Yes, please. When I first became a member of the board, which was with the very first board, I was very concerned about this being in its infancy. Electronic voting was just a new thing to HOAs. It had not been proven, and the system offered by Becker and Polikoff was brand new to everybody. I felt that we needed time to have the kinks worked out. It has been proven over time that this is a safe and secure way to do it, but it also allows residents who are not comfortable voting electronically to do so in a paper fashion, so that both options are open to, or either option is open to an individual member of the community. I am sure that there are some people who have strong feelings on each side. The fact that every resident has to make a determination of their own, and once, if they do choose to go to electronic voting, they are then going through a second process of choosing their password, which is independent of anything that the HOA itself would have a finger or in. It is absolutely separate from that. Just like in Vera, when we all signed up to get in Vera, there will be a process to sign up for electronic voting. It will be far simpler than in Vera because we're not putting stickers on cars and we're not doing all of that. It will be a simpler fashion, but there is a process, and it does take a fair amount of time to get this accomplished. In the past, when this was considered shortly before each election period, there was not sufficient time to do this. Now that this has been brought in a much closer proximity to the mid-year, there is sufficient time. And so my personal choice is going to be to support this, where in the past I was very concerned about it. I think that it is proven that the kinks have been worked out, that there are no glaring objections to going forward with this. So I will support your motion.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Yes. I'd like to share that I did talk with Tommy Doyle, who is the Lee County Supervisor of Elections, and asked him about the safety and whether this is a practice that he supports. And he said that while you can't guarantee that there would be no one that would hack the system, he finds it unlikely. And he also, at the time I talked with him, indicated that he would be happy to have the elections office do our election. However, in 2020, because our annual meeting is in March, or has been in March, They cannot do it because of the presidential primary. They're going to have a lot going on in 2020, and so it wouldn't work out. Perhaps in 2021, where we don't have elections, they would be happy to come make a presentation and also handle our voting. I don't know whether it would be less expensive, but probably. Because he did give me a quote of around $200, and I thought that was a very reasonable amount. It's just that it won't work for our next election, and I thought I'd wanted to share that with you.
Any other discussion? Then I'd like to speak on this as in favor of electronic voting. As a member of the Pennsylvania Dental Association and one of the delegates to the annual meeting, this was brought up for voting for all the officers of the association. I voted in favor of it there. I have voted twice on electronic voting for the officers and the ADA delegates, and it works well. You get an email back. There's checks and balances, and I would speak in favor. Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote on the adopting an electronic voting policy for the Coach OA. But, yes. Well, I am. I don't know about you. Okay, so that all in favor and anybody opposed? Okay, that is passed. Next item on the agenda.
Pool umbrella purchase request. To introduce this item, Molly actually wrote an intro, which I thought was really good. The umbrella replacement goal is to have uniformity going forward with chair and umbrella colors that will accentuate the surrounding colors of the pool. For historical knowledge, the original colors of the copying tiles of the pool were blue, yellow, green, and red, and orange. When the pool was resurfaced in late 2018, those coping tiles were removed and blue tiles were utilized. Unfortunately, a former employee did not order appropriate chairs and umbrellas in colors that would match the new tile and paint colors that were ordered for the pool. To rectify the issue of multicolored chairs and umbrellas going forward, the color scheme should be blue, yellow, and green. Those three colors will match the yellow of the building, the blue tile, the blue and the green in the lounge chairs, and pool water features, along with the blues and greens of the playground equipment. 3 orange umbrellas are in current need of replacement. That leaves the following unusable umbrellas: 1 orange, 2 blue, 3 yellow, 4 green. It is suggested that 1 yellow and 2 umbrellas be purchased. By doing so, there will be an equal number of blue, yellow, and green umbrellas. In addition, the 12 orange chairs should be placed around the 2 large tables, 6 chairs at each table. The umbrella color for those 2 larger tables should be 1 yellow and the 1 remaining orange umbrella. Over time, as the orange chairs fail, they should be replaced with the blue, green, or yellow chairs in proportion to the remaining colored umbrellas. The current demographic of chairs are as follows: yellow 22, blue 12, green 12, and orange 12. In addition, when large umbrellas need to be either replaced in total or in fabric, the colors should match the blue, yellow, and green of the smaller umbrellas. And then on the bar request, the first thing I like to say, the bar number is actually 2019.07.251, and that is obviously to stay and coordinate with the date. And if we had 2 bars in one meeting, the next one would be 2, et cetera. So without going through the bar, I think everybody's read it. So, but since then, I would like to thank Al Roper. He actually went online, did a little detective work, and found an outfit via Amazon called Elite Shade that offered a very comparable umbrella for $159.95. And because of the significant price difference, I mean, it was obvious, wow, you know, what's going on here. So I got all the specs for both of the umbrellas and called Pinch a Penny, which is where we ordered the existing new umbrellas right now, and where Libby got the cost for the proposed umbrellas. And we went over the specs with them, and the only difference was there was no warranty on the frame for the cheaper umbrellas. But Pinch a Penny, who is passing up a lot of money, frankly told me that is just an excellent deal and we should not pass it up. So the motion today, barring any further discussion, would be to purchase the 3 umbrellas at $159.95 from Elite Shade in the color scheme that Molly suggests.
For the benefit of the residents, the original price of the 3 umbrellas.
$7.99.
Huh?
$7.99.
And what's the price now?
$159
Okay.
per umbrella.
Per umbrella.
Before we go further on this.
And they're not 2 feet tall, are they?
And fit in a glass?
Yeah. We actually could, for the price of what we would have paid for 1 umbrella, we could purchase 4 and have 1 in reserve, because there's 1 umbrella out there that is just about ready to collapse. So instead of asking for the 3, I would like to make a motion that we purchase 4 of them at $159 plus tax.
And rather than 1 yellow and 2 blue, what color would be this?
I would add additional blue one.
Okay, so 3. So then the board motion would be to approve 4 umbrellas, 1 yellow, 3 blue from Elite Shade for a cost of $159.95 each plus tax.
I so move.
Second?
Okay, discussion?
A quick question on why we're replacing them. I didn't catch that because I didn't.
They're not functional.
Is it the structure? Can we, because they do sell new fabric for them.
Rusting out real bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For $159, I don't think you could pay to even get them redone.
Right.
I support doing this, but I think Chris made a good point that maybe we should have an ad hoc committee to come up with an overall plan for and I like the color scheme that you've come up with, but I think we should get confirmation that more people agree with that color scheme.
Well, the only reason that I worked with Libby on this is these chairs were purchased less than a year ago. They have a long life expectancy. So the umbrella life expectancy is less than the chair life expectancy. Unfortunately, when they were ordered, the person who ordered them was told that the coping tiles were going to be changed and in color, but they ordered bright colors that matched the old coping tiles of red, orange, yellow, blue, green. Yeah. So we have all these things now. I would venture to say that we would replace umbrellas 3 times before we would replace chairs. The chairs are new and they're sturdy. I can certainly understand on down the line, but we are far out from that. The next major thing that would have to be replaced would be the loungers. And at that time, making them neutral as opposed to having a color in them would start that phase, but we're not there yet. And when we would do a large expenditure of the loungers, that you could put in that neutrality then. But I don't think that we're at that point yet.
But are you saying then, this is a small purchase, so proceed with it, but if we were going to do a larger one, we should do an ad hoc committee and get more community input as to what we're doing?
Well, I'm just saying that we're nowhere near that, and that would probably need to be discussed on down the line, because we're just talking a small amount. I'd hate to do everything in one color out there right now when we have all these loungers, and the loungers were restrapped less than 2 years ago? 2 years ago. So when they were restrapped, half of them have blue stripes at the top, half of them have green. This is not a Molly Knott's decision. This was something that I spent several hours with Libby. We're out there counting all the things that we already have and looking at what's there. In reality, when somebody comes to the pool, what's the first thing they're going to do with a chair or a lounger? They're going to throw their towel over top of it. What you really see out there are the umbrellas. Unfortunately, there's these large ones. There's a teal one out there. Teal doesn't match anything. I don't know why that one was ever chosen. There's a Home Depot orange one, which stands out like a sore thumb. Fortunately, there are no red ones because those faded terribly. There's a blue one out there in the large one, but it isn't the same shade of blue. So getting uniformity, at least in the yellow, the blue, and the green, which we have the most in colors right now, just makes more sense.
Well, I agree with you, but
think this is
I'm
a
thinking
small
that we ought to have the
purchase. We're spending a
community
lot of
input
time on something
before we
that's
make a big
ridiculous.
expenditure in the future.
But that's still on, way
But
on
that's-
down the line.
That's down the road, but I
Way
think we
down
should
the
say
line.
that's our intention, that yes, we should do an ad hoc committee when that time comes.
Yes.
Well, we probably won't be on the board then, so, I mean.
won't be.
3 years from now, who knows what the board composition is gonna look like.
The end of the discussion and vote, frankly. All in favor
Do we have a
of
second?
approving the bar?
Did we have a second?
You
Yeah,
seconded it, didn't you?
I did.
No, I
Okay, you
moved
did,
for
We
it.
wouldn't be in discussion if you didn't.
Marilyn second. I just didn't have it.
Okay, all in favor of purchasing 4 umbrellas? Next item
From Amazon.
from Amazon. Per Al Roper's research.
159.
Next item, next item on the agenda is reserve study. Sandoval's reserve study was completed by reserve advisors on May 13th, 2019. Results of the study were provided to us on June 24th and provided to the Finance Committee and the Board of Directors for feedback, questions, or concerns. Being there were no questions or concerns that would directly impact the study, tonight I placed it on the agenda for board approval as submitted. A few notes for the board and the audience, and I've got 8 of them. First, a copy of $1,168,400 to be our ending balance in 2049. The funding plan is allowing for 1.7% as an anticipated annual rate of return on invested reserves. The funding plan also allows for a 2.1% inflation rate for future costs. The balance of our reserve funds used for the study is $2,115,746 in reserves, plus an anticipated $300,000 of income in 2019, which we've already heard tonight will well exceed. We are currently doing very well with reserve income and are trending towards year-end reserve revenue over $400,000. For those of you who care to visit our website tomorrow to view the reserve study, you will see a spreadsheet detailing all of our assets, a useful life expectancy of the asset, and under the appropriate year when the useful life expires, a dollar amount of anticipated major repair or replacement of the asset. Additionally, you will see details of each category and a summary of what the categories includes as it relates to major repair or replacement costs. One item all previous boards and our current board have known was coming is a decision on how to continue funding reserves once annual costs increase to increase to the level beyond what the reserves take care of. So in essence, we've got about 4 years, 3 to 4 years. If we did nothing, our resales at the current trend will be able to take care of. So while it isn't a concern definitely for 2020 and likely not for 2021, I would recommend that the Finance Committee begin formulating methods to offset future expenses where the reserve assessment cannot cover it. And for those of you who are wondering, the reason the funding is increasing each year is obviously for inflation. What costs $100 today is going to cost $200 tomorrow. So there's a few ways that the Finance Committee and the board can look at bridging that gap, and the obvious ways would be an increase of the reserve assessment. The other way would be an annual reserve assessment to homeowners, and you're talking less than $100 to make a major impact anytime in the foreseeable future, or a combination of those two things. I think that those are the primary things that the committee and the board will be looking at. But between now and then, there may be additional methods that the Finance Committee derives and recommends to the board. So I think I said upon a board adoption reserve study, it will be posted to the community website tomorrow morning. I recommend the board make a motion to adopt the 2019 reserve study as presented.
I so move.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, I can't speak to most of what's in that reserve study, but sitting on council, we receive many requests for road repaving. And the city uses a lifetime expectancy on city roads of 20 to 25 years, and in the study, they used 15 to 20 years, which is surprising to me that it was so much lower than what the city standard is. And I would think that our roads might even receive less use than city roads. So while I'm going to support the reserve study, I do believe that they're being very conservative, very cautious on what they're proposing. And I would certainly hope that a future board, when they decide to spend these reserve dollars to repave, that they're judicious in their decision, because I don't believe, we have roads north of Pine Island Road that are 30 years. The ones just west of Del Prado, that almost across from Coralwood Mall, I know they're 25 years, and they're going to be paved this year. So consequently, I'm just a little cautious on what has been recommended in that reserve study.
I know that when we met with the reserve advisor, we added a line item in the reserve study for repairs, which would then lessen the need to do a full repaving. And so I think that we will be able to extend the life expectancy of the roads, because in an area that might need a little repair, we were going to have funding in the reserve study to do that.
Okay.
The other point I'd like to make is, if there's one consensus over the 15 years I've been doing this, is that reserve companies are conservative by nature. Not only conservative on the costs, but also the useful life, both. So if we do a reserve study update every 3 years, it just things like
Push
that get
forward.
pushed out. Yeah.
The
So-
reserve study does not obligate you to replace it.
No,
Correct.
I know it doesn't.
So
That's my understanding, that the reserve study is a guide, it's not a Bible.
That's
and it's
correct.
just
you'd
a
rather
good
have the
guess.
money available and not need it than need it and not have it. So
But the finance committee, I did give a copy of the reserve study to all the members of the finance committee, and they've looked at it. They had some questions. I would ask, I'll support adopting it, but I would request that we ask someone from Reserve Associates to come and talk to the finance committee specifically about it, just so that they can be real comfortable with it.
Okay, and maybe we can agree to disagree, but I was at the finance committee meeting, and I think they asked 3 or 4 questions that did not have an impact on the study itself. I think the thing that I got out of it, the primary comment I got out of it, which I fully agreed with, is before we do our next study, maybe create a ad hoc committee to analyze deeper some of our bigger assets, so we know and we can explain to the reserve person that's doing our study closer to what our needs are. And let me explain better. So the slide, for instance, and the wall. So at the time the reserve study was we were meeting with them and it was done, I did not know how much we needed or if we needed any money for the slide, and I did not know to the extent of how much we needed for the wall. Had we had a committee together 6 months prior, those answers would have been done. So as a result, I acted conservative too, and I asked them to move it down to 2019. Because if we're going to fix this perimeter wall, which looks like it's crumbling in many, many areas, I felt like I needed the money. Well, we're still not there yet, but I feel very comfortable right now we're not going to need the $326,000. I don't know that for a fact, though. The slide, for instance, we had $20,000 that I asked them to move to 2019, and we had the slide inspected, professionally inspected, and as it turns out, I'm only going to need $1,500. But I just didn't know those things. So the best comment I think that came out of the committee recommendation was the formation of before the next study of that. But again, I didn't have any questions that I felt were impactful to the study from an approval standpoint.
Well, it has nothing to do with our supporting it tonight.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is,
Sure.
at the next finance committee, we can have another discussion, and if they feel like they would like someone to come to really go through it with them,
Sure.
is that possible?
Absolutely.
That's what I'm asking.
Well,
Well,
I say that.
Yeah, what's the cost?
they have to fly in from Minnesota.
We may have one, I need to talk to them. I think we might have one follow-up that we can get them on the phone. We're not going to have them in person. It would just be a phone
Okay.
conference. Yeah. I'll find that out, Bill.
Any other discussion on the reserve study? Let's vote on approving the reserve study. All in favor? All opposed?
Unanimous?
The next item is the revised management contract.
So in May of this year, it came to my attention, there's a provision in the current Pope management contract which requires Pope to provide violation inspection support 2 full work days of no less than 16 hours a week. In June, Pope agreed that in lieu of that support, I think we announced this in a board meeting, it would compensate the association 40% of the operations manager salary. Due to that proposed change in offerings, I approached Pope in regard to amending the current agreement to include the following changes, and there's 3 of them. 1, changing the termination clause from either party canceling the agreement with 30 days notice to 90 days notice. I believe this is mutually benefiting in that a community the size of Sandoval would not be able to recruit, contract, and have boots on the ground with a new management company within 30 days, rather 90 days is the industry standard. And then secondly, making it clear that the association's authorization for employee salaries and staffing levels are approved through the annual budget, which is the standard way that you guys approve those. And then on Exhibit A8, memorializing that in lieu of 16 hours of Pope violation support, it would compensate the association 40% of the operations manager salary. And one addition to that, someone approached me, I can't remember which board member it was, and we want to add to that in lieu of someone missing in that position being open, that Pope would continue offering the 16 hours violation support. So I'm looking for the board to make a motion approving the proposed Pope management contract as read.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
This is not so much in the vein of this, but I just think, since we're talking about it, most of our contracts that I know had that 30-day clause. And I would think for consistency and for transparency that all of our contracts moving forward would have that 90-day clause, because I totally agree, trying to find another vendor who meets the qualifications when you go out for the RFP and all of that, 30 days probably isn't a time frame constraint that we can meet. So across the board, in light of transparency, make them all 90 days moving forward.
I would like, I appreciate that, but I think there are some instances where we would want 30, where the association has absolutely no downside, and we want to get rid of someone.
Right,
quick.
and yep.
Okay, so I would like the flexibility in that, and I think we're looking towards, I don't know if you put a money dollar amount to it, but the bigger contracts that you just can't do in 30 days, maybe that protects us. But the smaller contracts, no.
Right, I agree.
The one thing that I'm concerned about here is I don't think we're getting the 40%, and I don't think we're getting the 16 hours. And I think that, Pope's making money on us in both of these instances. First, we don't have the employee here, so they're saving the 40. And I don't think that we're getting 16 hours a week. I think, if that's in their contract, they're not fulfilling that.
I'll just add to that too, that I was told there was going to be some staff training because there was a significant period of time when they weren't providing the 16 hours, although they were contractually obligated to do it. So I really think that this effort moving forward to not only be here 16 hours, but to appropriately train the staff that we do have to make sure this is done in a cohesive manner needs to be taken care of, and I'd like to see where we are with that.
Did Carol get the training? Did the lady come that was supposed to train you on how to do all the forms? Did she come? How many times did she come?
She came
Okay, yeah. So, so that they fulfilled that obligation, but I don't think they fulfilled the 16 hours, so.
Yeah, the issue with that, quite honestly, is a little bit of travel time, and I think Pope is including that travel time in the 16 hours.
Oh, from Sarasota?
Yep.
So,
But how many days, if he's coming one day a week, he does not, I don't think he's.
And then the other individual works out of the office for the other 8 hours. So one individual comes on site on Tuesdays and does the inspections, and the other individual works in the office at Sarasota and enters the data.
so we may have 4 hours of travel time and 4 hours of boots on the ground here doing.
That's
and then probably
exactly what you have.
and 8 hours of office time for sure. So really,
Should this exclude the travel time?
Well, that's not I don't know whether that's negotiation, but I just want to point out that I don't think we're getting our money's worth out of this.
Jerry, what is your opinion of whether we're getting our money's worth?
Well, that's a tough situation.
Jerry works for Pope.
But
No,
I
he
will.
works for-
I think I can give you some information without. So I think that if this was a long term, if it was just, we were talking to 16 hours a week, I think I would work with Pope a little harder to get a little bit more out of it. But I cannot reveal details right now, but we are very close. In fact, I would say that I have made a selection on the compliance person, and now I have a little bit more work to do because of the result of who I selected on that. So I think we're about a week. I know that's very difficult to understand what I'm saying, but there's so much I can't say publicly. But we're very close. I think we're within 2 or 3 weeks of having a full staff, and because of that, I'm not as concerned about it. And we're at a point with deed restrictions, we have sent out so many letters, we can't keep up with it internally. I mean, I'm so behind on returning phone calls, emails. It's just the activity. So I'm in a slow down mode right for the moment. I think everything will work out.
Well, what we're proposing is taking the 16 hours out, putting 40% in, so there'd be no travel time. The 16 hours goes away, so there's no travel time in it.
Once we
So-
hire the
so it's a moot-
employee,
it's a moot
it
question
would
then.
become a moot point.
Yeah,
That's correct.
So
We're only
if-
talking about when the position's open.
yeah.
So if this is, why are we even putting that in there if this? is-
Well, because the feeling was from a board member that what if 6 months from now we have another opening, or what if 2 years from now there's another opening? They wanted that provision covered for future purposes.
Well, now, hold it. What I read here is that in lieu of 16 hours, it'll be 40%. So the 16 hours is gone.
And
So if
then I added on to that verbally just
Oh,
now.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
because of Don's
I
conversation
was
with me.
asleep, I guess.
That's all right.
No, I want to make sure we're getting something.
Okay.
So
Okay,
let us revisit exactly what this motion entails. So it is as read, which includes the addendum that you gave to us
Thank you.
today
Yes.
on the very next to last page, highlighted in yellow, that says, at times when the position, hold on a second. At times when the position of the staff member who is responsible for property inspections is open, Pope will provide an employee to work 2 full workdays at no less than 16 hours per week.
That's correct.
Is that satisfactory, Don?
Mhm.
Okay.
One or the other.
Then I think we could call a vote on that. Are you
Okay.
ready to call a vote?
Yeah, I'm ready. Everyone ready to vote? All in favor of this adoption of this policy, signify by raising your hand. Okay, thank you. Additional items?
Right now, we're soliciting additional agenda items.
I have one.
You had 2.
And my first one is me. When I moved to Sandoval, I put a surge protector on my house meter to prevent lightning issues, and that's not going to eliminate them, but everything helps. I have not had any issues with that. I have another house that didn't have it on it, and I had to replace some equipment. That's now has it. We had a tremendous lightning storm here, and we're still recovering from that, and at a significant cost. And I think that we need to consider putting that on all of our meters here. It's about $200 per meter. I mean, we have a lot of meters. Unfortunately, they're not all at one place, including all these lakes and the aeration. And whether we can do them all at once, and whether this could be a maintenance item from reserve, I don't answer that one way or the other. I would defer to the to the finance folks, but or a phased-in approach to do this, so that we're protecting ourselves a little bit. Something for consideration.
I'd like to make a recommendation, and I already planned on it. Don shared this with me, and I think it's an excellent idea, and I'm putting it in my 2020 budget. And if it can't all fit, then I was going to recommend to the Finance Committee to phase it in 2021, and perhaps 3 years, depending on the expense and amount of meters. But I think we can maybe get it in 2 years.
Is that $200 one-time charge or $200 per year?
One-time charge.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a lot of meters, though.
Yeah,
So I think that I don't have the money right now to do this. So I think the appropriate thing to do would have me put it in the 2020 budget. Is that recommended?
Jerry, can this be considered part of maintenance, maintaining these? Because it really keeps them safe. So if it's a maintenance issue, that could come on, some of these could come under the reserve, especially things like the pool meters, because that is maintaining that entity. And I don't know what the legality is there, but could we look into the legality of doing that? Could we check with the attorney to see if that is how we could cover some of those? I think that we should consider if we have to augment the price of the aeration of the lakes to cover surge suppressors on how many are we putting in the meters today?
11 total.
No, we're putting in 7 meters.
7 meters. So that's $1,400. We may well have that in what we allow.
The aeration budget would support that for the
I think
aeration
that those
project.
things we should certainly, because
But the issue is the aeration project's a capital expense, it's not a reserve expense. And so, and these items are not really, I will get an opinion if you want me to from the attorney, but I do not believe that they're going to be supported as a reserve component.
Well, I think that maybe we could consider these 7 new meters, we put them on right off the bat in the aeration project.
Yeah, I think too, you look into also what are we protecting with that? We might be metering street lights. And again, at $200, is it really worth putting on something? But, if we're protecting a substantial $100,000 investment, it's worth putting the $200 surge suppressor on there.
Well, and to that point, I told Don, I said the first place would be this clubhouse and the gates.
It's okay.
Marilyn's turn.
I just wanted to ask a question, and that is, what kind of insurance do we have? And the reason I'm asking this question is because about 7 years ago, thereabouts, we had a lightning strike at our home prior to moving here that had a seawall, and the repair was over $7,000, but our homeowner's insurance covered it, except, of course, for our deductible. So my question is, what kind of insurance do we have, or are we self-insured for things like this, or what is the situation?
Yeah, I mean, if we lost a component, we could certainly file a claim, but I think our effort there is to not have to use the deductible, which is high, and then also to prevent from having premiums rise. And I would think the $200 per meter would be money
reasonable.
Very well spent.
And how many meters do you believe?
I don't even know. Do you have any idea? Dal, do you know how many? What would you guess? Yeah,
Well,
30,
yeah.
40.
probably. Well, they're all over the place.
That's a special project.
Well, I think that the bigger,
Well, someone
bigger
has
dollar item should have it
evaluates
first.
the electric bill. You
But
could tell
since
it
we're
by looking at it.
installing the aeration equipment, it makes sense to put it on at
At the
that
same
time.
time.
If we can't will that require a vote for it, or do we think we already have enough money in the?
money's
in that-
there for that.
Okay.
And it will still be under the 325 that I estimated, not
Well,
500,000.
then that's a
Which was
given.
budgeted.
Will still be I think it'll be less than 325,000.
You just choose the most expensive or most vulnerable things after that and work down from there, is what
Yeah.
would seem to make sense.
In fact, if you would, well, you can't take that out of the other. Yes.
Next item, anybody?
The sunshade, voting on the funding of the sunshades is an agenda
That's-
item for the next meeting.
Yeah, we put that down
Well, that's
already.
definitely
That
on
was in
there.
the minutes.
I just want to make sure.
And also was the,
No, absolutely.
I can say that the Architectural Design Review Committee is already working on suggestions for garbage cans, as was brought up earlier. They met today and they had a wide discussion on it. Pictures were presented, but they're coming up with multiple ideas. Their biggest concern is whether it's going to have to be if everyone has to apply to the ARC for the type of coverage that they're going to use, and that would be a huge task to them.
Well, I think you need some kind of check and balance, because if you just say, okay, you got to do it, and if you don't go inspect it, I don't think you'll know what you're going to get.
Thank you.
Then we may want to consider having strictly a garbage can ARC, because they're pretty, Grady, you're pretty well taxed in the number of inspections that you have to do now. If you had to do another 500 to 700 garbage cans, that would be over the top for you. Am I? Okay, so we need to take that into consideration.
An ad-hoc committee to deal specifically with that, and it would be a short-term plan.
Okay. We've exhausted the list. Is there a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
Okay, adjourn.
Okay, next item outside of the scope of the meeting is open forum. First speaker is Jim Swigert.
Surprise, surprise.
I love everybody on the board, but tonight you made a bad decision by delaying the shade thing. Next month is August. The next month is September. Then they don't need shades. I tell you, all you're doing is making excuses. I'm embarrassed. These kids need that shade. I've been here 5, 6 years and they've talked about it. But no, just keep extending it. Keep extending it. I'll tell you what, I don't have no kids here, but I feel sorry for the kids that are here. I really do. I'm embarrassed.
Next speaker, Thomas Robertson.
Oh,
All right, so the first question is, that we did have an operations manager earlier this year. Did we get our 40% of his salary, journal entry, whatever you want to call it, into our system from their system?
Tom, that's really, come on. To stand up and ask that question, if it was in the contract, of course we did.
And the reason I
So-
asked that question
I
is
don't-
simply because the board members are asking the same question. Did we get our 40%?
Okay.
I think
I'll
you're
answer
the group that can answer it. I know we're the group that can't answer that question.
Okay, I'm the person that can answer that.
Okay?
The association did not get it because no one even heard of that. It wasn't a part of the contract. The contract, when we had an operation.
I've heard that before
Can
today.
I speak?
So.
Can I speak, please? The contract, up until right now, until 10 minutes ago, only allowed for 16 hours a week. There was no discussion about 40% until right now. So the answer is no. We didn't get 40%.
But I've heard that comment prior to today.
Okay.
So I had to get it from somewhere.
The person, Pete, who was hired, Pope paid 40% of his contract.
He wasn't was he an operations manager? I thought
Yep.
he was a pool attendant.
No, he was not a pool
I didn't
attendant.
know.
It appears that it's something that we could get an answer on because you have disagreement.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you're the people we have to go to.
If you didn't get it for Mark's salary, then you need to go back and ask them because they did it for the person before him.
Okay, so if they did it,
Which
it was a
means it did
verbal,
exist
it was a
before.
verbal, it wasn't a contracted
But
obligation.
I've heard it before. That's
Okay,
why I
fair
asked the
enough.
question that you should understand these things. I'm going to beat this one to death. I am so confused that I would love a townhouse or an opportunity for us to be explained, residents, the difference clearly between reserve, capital, and of course our regular everyday things. Previous board saying wasn't that there's no such thing as capital, but capital came out of reserve. So I'm very confused with this conversation, how it goes this way, that way. And the second half of that is, prior to our budget time, the $50-some-odd thousand a month that's going into, I call the lockbox, we need to determine as a community, I feel, where it goes, because we're going to need money into our regular operating cost. We need to know if it's going to have a portion go into reserve and a portion to go into capital fund, simply because if we talk about raising our dues, there is that $50,000 a month that's going out into a box that none of us have the impact on that. You guys are the ones, and I don't care, this board, the last board, it doesn't make a difference to me, that are controlling that lockbox that was essentially put together so that we could build a clubhouse. And the clubhouse, I know, is going to take time to figure it out, and I'll say it each time. Either we build a clubhouse or we don't build a clubhouse, and we fix the CenturyLink to be an understanded situation where our dues are going in a specific spot that we all know where that money is going. I'm not saying anybody's taking it or anything like that. I'm just saying it's going into a hole that we don't know whether we're going to build a clubhouse, not going to build a clubhouse. And I just think going forward, I can see us saying whatever it is, $4 a door from that goes into reserve. $20, $50 of that, $30 of that goes into capital. $20 of that goes into the operating expense. I just think we need to take that number and understand and have a target to where it goes. So I don't have to come up and say this all the time, and we either know we have it at capital, we can spend it at capital. It is in reserves, you can spend reserves, and we all know that our expenses are our expenses.
So I think I can help you out with everything. Thank you. So on the last statement, first of all, before any monies are spent from the CL or from the bulk telecommunications account, it requires board approval, which is an open public. So you will hear that. Then the second part of that will come into play is the Clubhouse Expansion Ad-hoc Committee. I'm sure at some point they will be coming up to the community and proposing the number they need, and at that time they'll also be discussing, funds available for that. So and then in that interim, the Finance Committee is watching the balance sheets as well. So I think between those three areas, I think we're very well covered. And then the difference between reserve and capital is capital are new items, new assets that you buy. You cannot use reserve funds for capital expenses. Those are new items that you buy. Reserve expense is to the major repair and replacement of that capital that you bought. Then operating is your checking account for your personal versus your savings account. It's your daily operating expenses, repairs, maintenance, etc. So that's a pretty brief explanation, simplistic explanation, but that's a good rule of thumb.
Being my first HOA, I guess my question is, do all HOAs, excluding an assessment, have 3 different funding accounts?
Well, all HOAs have operating accounts. Yes. And I would say in Florida, every HOA has a reserve account.
They all have a capital account.
Statutory. And then as far as capital, some associations create capital budgets and some don't. And I've already talked to Bill, and I believe he agrees that we are going to be doing that for 2020. And because, that's where someone might think, oh, we need a new asset, and the temptation is to use it from that bulk telecommunications. we need to create a capital budget so we can see in advance and we don't have those temptations. So,
And in your thought process, not that it'll occur, will we take and I'm going to use the word $50,000 and allocate those money toward those 3 different boxes?
it depends on the item, but that would come in a board meeting before the public, so you would be made aware of it. It wouldn't happen in secret. That money doesn't go anywhere secret. It's all in a board meeting. Thank you, Thomas. Next, Jerry Kern.
Thanks for your time. I know this is probably the 3rd or 4th month in a row I've been up here, kind of feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but what's one more whipping, right? I feel both for the board members that have been here for the last 6 months and those of you that are fairly new to the board. Just wanted to share a little bit of information since we seem like we're still stagnant on this aeration scenario. A little bit of history. As the first neighborhood within Sandoval to be developed by Bonita Bay, many of the governing documents from within Somerville were not written as transparent or straightforward as any of us would prefer. References to, quote, the association were ambiguous as to whether this term referred to the Sandoval Association or the Sandoval Community Association, and often were interchanged independent of context. Due to this confusion, Somerville has assumed infrastructure expenses logistically that should have been assigned to the developer and ultimately to Sandoval for the past 13 years. Attempts by Somerville during the past 6 years to correct these inequities have been met repeatedly by Sandoval board and representatives, hiding behind the mistakes of Bonita Bay and the contracts or the management control by Taylor Morrison. During this time, Sandoval board has used denials, misdirection, misinformation to deflect the responsibility. Give us time, it'll work out. Give us a little to get a little, are all phrases commonly used by the Sandoval Board of Past to underplay the circumstances since transition. Prior to the first house even being built, owners of Somerville have, and continue today, paid for infrastructure expenses out of the Somerville HOA fees that all other homeowners within the Sandoval receive as part of their quarterly assessments, even though Somerville residents continue to pay the exact same quarterly assessment amount to Sandoval as all other residents. Basic services such as the road maintenance, perimeter wall, street lights were all assumed the condo's responsibility due to the way the original documents were written by Bonita Bay. Sandoval has met recent attempts by Somerville with acknowledgement that inequalities existed and taken actions to correct these as listed in the board update that was sent out May 25th of 2018. In that statement, it was stated that Bonita Bay arbitrarily lodged ownership of the loop and wall in to the Somerville Recreation Association. The board will bring Somerville neighborhood into equitable basis with every other neighborhood within the community. We feel that while this initial effort was a stride in the right direction, it has not brought us to full equality. Recent actions by the Sandoval Board have created a divide, leaving Somerville residents feeling that we are not financially supported by the funds that we contribute to the Sandoval community. At the June board meeting, it was proposed Somerville residents pay an additional $6,000 to upgrade their lake aerators to the, quote, new standard, and only then would Sandoval take over management of those aerators. That sentiment was repeated again tonight. Somerville contributions make up well over 12% of more than of the current telecommunications funds, which in our estimate is well over in excess of $230,000. To use these funds for aeration project and expect Somerville residents to also pay for their own aeration installation is a gross injustice that is not expected from any other Sandoval neighborhood. Somerville Lake is connected to and part of the Sandoval Surface Water Management System, hence, by Section 12 of the Covenants of Sandoval, is the sole responsibility of Sandoval. Where is the consistent and equal treatment of all neighborhoods in this proposition that one neighborhood bear the cost of their own lake? So I ask, one, why are we asking Somerville residents to even consider paying for their own lake aeration installation when, if you expect the cost is $375,000 roughly for the lake aeration project installation, Somerville's already contributed over $52,000 of that by our quarterly assessments. So to say that we also need to pay an additional $6,000 to bring our own equipment up is just grossly and just. And we feel that, we need to, if we didn't have aerators in our lakes at all, we would expect that our lake would have been included in that proposal as part of the lake management system, and you would have been installing aerators in our lake. So the fact that we've been the benefactor of aerators for the last 13 years, we have paid for that benefit for the last 13 years. We're just looking at, well, what can we do moving forward? A couple of other last points for thought. Why is it that Somerville has one street light that we pay for to LCEC, where Sandoval took over all of the maintenance of those others years ago, but yet one street light alone remains a Sandoval or a Somerville expense? Shouldn't all the street lights be Sandoval infrastructure item? If I lived on any other street in the community and decided I wanted a street light in front of my house, I could contact LCEC and have it installed as long as I'm willing to pay for it. Doesn't seem like a good infrastructure policy for all of the community. Sandoval also provides dog stations along all the major walking paths as well as within several neighborhoods. Why is it that Somerville bears the cost of those ourselves? We pay for not only the dog bags themselves, but also for the removal and disposal. There are a number of communities that have dog stations existing. Ashbury, Verdmont, Anguilla, Lamb Bay, all have dog stations within those various communities, as well as Somerville. So the fact that Somerville has to pay for that themselves, where all of these others are being paid for by Sandoval, also seems like just one of a long list of injustices. So I would ask that the board, in your next vote, take all of these elements into consideration, as well as the cost and expectation of Somerville paying for their own lake aeration. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jerry.
Comment? Next speaker, Grady Stevens.
Good evening, everybody. One of the things I wanted to clarify was earlier on in the meeting, Dawn, you said about not using social media, and I completely agree with that. That doesn't report anything to anybody. But you indicated that email should be going to the board. And I just want to clarify, you don't really want that going to the board. You want that going to Jerry's email address? Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, some people do send us emails.
I'm sure.
There's a conscious effort to try to answer.
Yeah. No, I agree.
But my point is the constant comments and then the blowing out of proportion on social media doesn't solve anything, because other than just airing your irritation, and then one person piles on to someone else.
Don, that never happens on on Facebook.
No.
No, I think everybody.
I'm just looking for a positive way
No, I
we
get.
can solve problems and not just inadvertently gripe about it all.
I completely agree, and I just wanted to clarify that you don't want people going around Jerry's email. You want, and going to the board, you want them to primarily focus to send to him. And
I'm looking for a way to solve problems.
Yep.
Not
Right.
just to complain about it.
Okay.
Grady, if I could just jump in too and echo Don, during the last week probably, and it has nothing to do with the site or the administrator of the site, but there have been so many falsehoods placed on social media sites when all people had to do, and I know these people have access to myself and other board members, instead of, and it really puts a burr under my saddle, so here it goes. So instead of spewing falsehoods, pick up the phone, knock on my door, text me, email me, and voice your concern, because we will have an answer. As a realtor, I can tell you this just perpetuates an air of who wants to move to Sandoval. So let's handle the problems the way they need to be handled, whether it's through Jerry or a board member, come up with a general consensus. And I understand frustration and aggravation, but it's doing no good. I'm not saying signaling you out, but again, contact us. Like Don said, let's work to this instead of, and then 20 people think that that's the truth when in fact it's not. So let's at least go to the source and find out what, and if we can't have an answer for you, someone will find an answer in a short period of time. So again, I always avail myself, and that's what I ran on. I want to be transparent. So don't put falsehoods out there. Pick up the phone and say, Scott, what's going on? And I think most board members will say the same thing. Contact me.
Okay, good. I just wanted to clarify that when you made that comment, and don't make bad comments on.
We're not shooting the messenger.
No. You know what? I've been shot at before. But to your point, some of the web pages do allow non-residents to be on those Facebook pages. That's not the place you want to have those discussions.
Exactly.
So, point taken. I was surprised, as well as everybody else was, about Morgan & Morgan showing up. Thank you to the entire board for doing that. Ron, if you were instrumental in getting that to happen, thank you. You've done something. This entire board has done something that Joe Kilrain told us was going to happen for years, and it never did. What a huge step in the right direction. Even if we don't get anywhere, we're doing what's supposed to be done. We're supposed to do the right thing, even if it's not to our advantage. Thank you so much for all of that. The last thing, Molly, your comments about the clubhouse. I think the time to separate the sunshades from the clubhouse is now. We were talking about these sunshades before the clubhouse came to fruition. As it is right now, I know that we have the PDP plan that you discussed earlier, but we don't have a footprint. We don't have a square footage. We don't have a cost. We have no definitive plans. We do need these sunshades. They've been needed for a long time. I would encourage everyone on this board to consider moving forward on the sunshades as quickly as possible, and don't link it to anything with the clubhouse. To make plans to connect those sunshades to the clubhouse at this point, it's a horrible idea. And that's just all I'll say. I mean, I appreciate all the comments that you made. In my dealings with you, you are always very cautious, and you try to think of every possible scenario to save, to do things the correct way. But the time for separating the sunshades for the clubhouse is overdue. So
thank you.
Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Speaker. Karen Yakubel.
I'm sorry, Jerry, the name?
Sorry?
Karen Yakubelli.
Karen Yakubelli from Somerville. I just want to keep it brief. I was just concerned to see that you were taking the gate strikes before the fining committee. Personally, I don't see that as a finable offense. I see that as property damage, clear-cut property damage. And also, if they leave the scene of a gate strike, it actually becomes a hit and run, which to me isn't necessarily a finable offense. I think you just need to go after payment for repairs, and if further steps need to be taken with police action, so be it. But I think bogging yourself down before the fining committee to get a $100 violation is just a waste of the committee's time and of the board's time and so forth. I do see the security reports on a daily basis. There are multiple finable offenses that need to be addressed as far as parking on the grass, cars parked in the streets, boats on trailers. I know you're getting a handle on that, but honestly, that's what should be going before the committee and before a committee of the peers to determine whether or not that is a finable offense. Gate strikes to me are just clear cut and don't waste your time. That's just my opinion. Also, just with the trash cans, I just want to point out, I live on Somerville Loop. We have the same recycling bin, the same trash cans, everybody else in Somerville, in Sandoval. Our trash cans are in our garages, out of sight. I hear, the art committee want to come up with ideas for homeowners, how to hide the garbage cans. Hey, look, it's a trash can. Make room for it in your garage. We do, and I don't understand why it's such a difficult thing for other homeowners to do. In Somerville, the trash cans are left out or put out before 6 or not taken in by 6 p.m. the next evening. It is a finable offense. If they're left out overnight, if they're visible, it's a finable offense. That's the kind of stuff I think should be coming before the fining committee, my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, last thing I'll say, I just want to make a comment on that, because I think on the surface, my first reaction was I agree with you, but I think if you see the amount of man hours that our maintenance tech spends at the gates, we have got to do something about it, plus the inconvenience of the homeowners.
Again, that $100, it talks a little bit, but not to most people. What really talks is a police report. File charges. I mean, it's property destruction, and I think it needs to be addressed.
So here's the issue with that. I hate to say this. We've only had 2 incidences out of probably 30 where there was any damage. So a lot of people think when we say gate strikes that there's money involved. There's not.
Okay. It's not just damage, it's the person that...
It's the man hour, the man hours.
And I think that's...
But she's talking about property damage.
But she's talking about, you're saying there hasn't been any It's how much does it cost us to go out, have someone go out and fix those gates? I mean, it's a cost
No,
in addition to the,
Maybe
in addition
it's-
to what the damage is.
I agree. So I agree with Bob, the maintenance director, and that's the reason I support gate strikes. Are you hearing? I mean, I think she's supporting not spending as much time.
I don't think it needs to go before fining. I think
Right.
if the board determines it's a $500 flat fine for the repairs that are involved, in addition to whatever your insurance recoupment is. But I think that you're going to take a gate strike, now keep in mind, you take it before a committee of your peers. That committee could deny that great gate strike and say, well, there's not enough evidence to prove that it ever happened.
So
And the
so
committee
if
can
there's no monetary damage to charge someone, then what would you charge them?
That's a decision for the board to make. If it's a gate strike where you have someone's license plate, you know that that's the vehicle that committed the gate strike, maybe a flat fee for damages, for costs involved in repair to the gate and man hours to reset the bars and straighten out the gates. But I think to take it before a committee of your peers that can then turn down that offense, you can walk away and get nothing out of it too.
Yeah, so we have a rule that says you can't tailgate, and that's the rule violation that's promulgating the $100 thing, and
That's
it's
different than a gate strike. You know, tailgating.
well, the
through-
tailgating is the violation that caused the gate strike. So that's what we're attaching to it in order to be able to even fine them $100. So I've talked with our attorney about this when we had the $500, and he was adamant that we have no ability to. Now, damages, yes, and that's why we are
Damages,
doing
okay.
that separately. But the fining for the breaking of the rule is $100 maximum.
So that would be a tailgating
Per
violation.
occurrence, up to $1,000.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think you just need to be clear on how you, because we heard gate strikes, for, I hear property damage when I hear gate strikes.
Right.
So if there's property damage involved, I think that's clear
Yeah.
cut. You can just recoup
Well,
it.
it's
If
the barrier arm
tailgating-
falling off and our maintenance guy having to come from St. James
Yeah.
City and
Yeah,
spending an
I
hour
agree.
driving, and that's what we're trying to stop. And the one thing you said that I really appreciate, I haven't thought about, is why not file a police report,
Yeah.
for non-owners, because those are the ones that we're not going to get the $100 from.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we don't know who they're visiting, because if a guest comes in and tailgates, all we know is they're a guest,
Mm-hmm.
but because they didn't use Envera, we don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
But we get their address, so maybe foolishly, but I'm still going to charge them $100 and send them an invoice because I know their name and where they live. But I think a police report is something I'm definitely going to look into.
It carries weight, has meat behind it.
I agree.
So.
Thank you for your
You're welcome.
comments.
Thank you.
I think- If you have any, yeah, go ahead.
Just hand him a mic. Hand Bob a mic.
Good evening. I don't want to drag this on any longer. I'm curious about something that Director DeFilippis brought up earlier, and he said that he had studied some kind of a log where people are behind, and he knows who they are. I'd like to know why somebody is arbitrarily looking at that. We had a problem with this, I don't know whether it was the last 2 elections ago, where somebody got some information and it kind of put a real damper on some people that were running. It was information that was not public, and I don't believe what Scott was talking about earlier is public information, and quite frankly, I don't think he should have it.
Okay, my response is it is public information. It's discoverable, and as a board member, Scott has every right to it.
Why?
He's a board member. He has to make decisions based upon collections and covenants violations. And
He only needs a figure. He doesn't need to know people's names and addresses.
thank you.
The second thing, I'd like to see some maybe time restraints put on these meetings. 9 o'clock for the end of this and 8:30 for the end of your meeting.
Thank you. All right, I think that's it. Yes, yes. I'll get it. Yeah. Yep. Maybe open. I hope it's not. If your purse is.